It cost me 3 broken ribs and a collapsed lung to finally see the true face of the woman I called Mom, while I lay bleeding in the wreckage. My mother-in-law rejected the hospital's emergency call, claiming my dying newborn was not pure blood enough to interrupt her dinner with a senator. She thought she was untouchable. She forgot that while she played God, my grandmother was quietly preparing to burn her entire dynasty to the ground. My name is Emily Weatherford, and the first thing I knew of the world was pain. It was not a dull ache or a throbbing sensation. It was a sharp, blinding absolute that seemed to rewrite the very code of my existence. It felt as though someone had replaced my blood with molten lead and my bones with shattered glass. I tried to inhale, but my chest refused to expand. A jagged, searing agony ripped through my left side, forcing a choked, wet gasp from my throat. I opened my eyes, but the world was nothing but a blur of aggressive white light and stainless steel. The air smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. The olfactory signature of a place where death and life negotiate shift changes. Beep, hiss, beep, hiss. The rhythm of the machines was the only thing tethering me to reality. I was in an ICU. Then, the memories hit me. They did not come in a linear stream, but in violent, disjointed flashes. The sound of tires screeching against wet asphalt. The rain lashing against the windshield of the old sedan my mother-in-law had forced me to drive. The blinding headlights of the truck running the red light. The terrifying weightlessness as the car spun. And then, the impact. The crunch of metal folding like paper. The glass exploding inward. My hands. I remembered my hands. In that split second before the world went black, I had not braced myself against the steering wheel. I had thrown my arms over my stomach, my baby. "Leo," I croaked. The name tore at my dry throat like sandpaper. A figure moved in my periphery. It was a woman in scrubs, her face obscured by a surgical mask, but her eyes held a weight that terrified me. She was the head nurse. I could tell by the authority in her posture and the distinct lack of hesitation as she checked the monitors. "Mrs. Sterling?" she asked, her voice soft but practiced. "Can you hear me?" "My baby," I whispered, the panic rising in my chest, fighting against the sedation. "Where is my son?" The nurse lowered the clipboard she was holding. She pulled the mask down, revealing a face etched with exhaustion and a pity I did not want to see. "He is alive, Emily. Your son is alive." The relief was so profound it almost made me pass out again, but she continued before I could celebrate. "He is in the NICU, the Neonatal Intensive Care Unit. He was born prematurely at 32 weeks. He is very small, and his lungs are underdeveloped. But he is a fighter. He is stable for now." Stable. That was medical code for not dying at this exact second. But he was alive. Leo was alive. I tried to sit up, but a fresh wave of agony slammed me back against the pillows. "Liam," I gasped. "I need Liam. Does my husband know? Is he with the baby?" The nurse's expression shifted from professional sympathy to something darker, something uncomfortable. She looked away, adjusting a tube on my IV drip that did not need adjusting. "We tried to contact your husband, Mrs. Sterling," she said, avoiding my eyes. "Mr. Sterling is currently in Japan. As you know, apparently, there is a severe blizzard affecting the satellite communications in the mountainous region where he is staying. We have not been able to get a signal through for 12 hours. I closed my eyes. Of course, Beatrice had sent him there. She had insisted that only Liam could handle the negotiations for the new Tokyo resort. She had orchestrated his absence perfectly, timing it for the weeks leading up to my due date. "Then who signed?" I asked, my mind racing. "If I was unconscious and Liam is unreachable, who authorized the emergency C-section? Who signed the consent forms for Leo's treatment?" The room went silent. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor seemed to grow louder, filling the empty space where an answer should have been. The nurse looked down at her shoes, then back at me. She looked angry, not at me, but for me. "No one came, Emily," she said quietly. "What?" We followed the hospital protocol for emergency situations involving a minor heir to a major estate, the nurse explained, her voice tightening. When we couldn't reach your husband, we called the secondary emergency contact listed in your file, Mrs. Beatrice Sterling. Hope, foolish and naive, flickered in my chest. Beatrice hated me. She despised the fact that a middle-class architect had married her golden boy. But this was her grandson. This was the Sterling heir she had been obsessed with controlling since the day I announced my pregnancy. Surely, faced with the death of her own blood, she would step up. Was she with Leo? I asked. The nurse walked over to the bedside table. She picked up a digital tablet and tapped the screen a few times. Her movements were stiff. Part of our liability protocol requires us to record all emergency authorization calls when consent is refused or ambiguous. I think you need to hear this, so you understand the situation regarding your billing and discharge options. She pressed play. The audio was crisp. I heard the frantic voice of the hospital administrator explaining the situation. The crash, my critical condition, the fetal distress, the immediate need for surgery to save the baby. Then, I heard her, Beatrice Sterling. Her voice was not frantic. It was not worried. It was annoyed. I could hear the clinking of crystal glasses and the low hum of classical music in the background. She was at a party. I am in the middle of a dinner with the senator, Beatrice's voice cut through the recording, dripping with disdain. Why are you calling me with this drama? Ma'am, we need authorization to operate. The baby is in distress, the administrator on the recording pleaded. Then let nature take its course, Beatrice said. The coldness in her tone froze the blood in my veins. I have always doubted the validity of that pregnancy. Don't bother me again. That child is not a pure blood of the House of Sterling, and I am not interrupting my evening for a bastard. The line went dead. The nurse stopped the recording. I lay there, staring at the white ceiling tiles. The silence in the room was absolute. My mother-in-law had not just refused to come. She had left my son to die. She had actively chosen her social standing over the life of her grandchild, not a pureblood. The words echoed in my skull, louder than the crash, louder than the pain of my 3 broken ribs. Because she refused liability, the nurse said gently. Breaking the silence, the hospital board had to override standard procedure to perform the surgery as a trauma necessity. However, it means you are currently listed as a self-pay patient. Beatrice Sterling has blocked the family insurance from covering this admission. I looked at the nurse. I don't have that kind of money. I know, she said. We will figure it out. Rest now. She left the room, leaving me alone in the dim light. I checked the clock on the wall. It was 3 a.m. Outside, the city of Chicago was sleeping. Oblivious to the fact that my world had just ended, I was alone. Liam was thousands of miles away, likely drinking sake with investors, completely unaware that his mother had tried to kill his son by proxy. I had no money. My bank accounts were joint, controlled by the Sterling family office. I had no car. My phone was likely destroyed in the crash. I was trapped in a private hospital that charged $2,000 a night just for the bed. With a premature baby who would need weeks of care that would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, tears, hot and angry, slid down my temples and into my ears. I wanted to scream, but my crushed lung wouldn't allow it. I felt a profound, crushing sense of isolation. I was the girl from the suburbs who thought love could conquer class divides. I was the idiot who thought patience would win over a monster. And now, I was the woman who was going to lose everything. I see you are finally awake. The voice came from the doorway. It was not a nurse. It was not Liam. I turned my head painfully. Standing in the shadow of the doorframe was my grandmother, Rose. For the last 5 years, Beatrice had forbidden me from bringing Grandma Rose to the Sterling estate. She called her that peasant woman, or the gardener. To me, Grandma Rose was just the quiet woman who raised me after my parents died, the woman who spent her days tending to her hydrangeas and knitting scarves. She was soft. She was simple. She was the one person I had tried to protect from the cruelty of the Sterling family by keeping them apart. But the woman standing in the doorway was not the grandmother I remembered. She was wearing a trench coat that looked deceptively plain, but fit her with military precision. Her silver hair, usually pulled back in a loose, messy bun, was styled in a sharp, elegant twist. She didn't look like a retired florist. She looked like a general surveying a battlefield. She walked into the room, her cane tapping a rhythmic, authoritative cadence on the linoleum floor. She didn't rush to my side to coddle me. She didn't cry. She didn't offer empty platitudes about how everything would be okay. She stopped at the foot of my bed and looked at me. Her eyes, usually warm and crinkling with laughter, were hard as flint. They scanned my bandages, the tubes, the monitors, and finally settled on my tear-streaked face. She reached into her large leather tote bag and pulled out a thick manila folder. She dropped it onto the rolling table over my bed. The sound of the heavy paper hitting the plastic surface made me jump. "Grandma?" I whispered. "How did you get here?" "The roads." "I have my ways," she said. Her voice was steady, lacking the tremble of age I was used to hearing. "And I know everything. I know about the call. I know about the insurance. I know about the accident." She pulled a chair closer, not dragging it, but lifting and placing it with deliberate grace. She sat down, crossing her hands over the handle of her cane. "You have spent 5 years trying to fit into a glass slipper that was 2 sizes too small. Emily," she said, "you let that woman walk over you because you thought being good meant being compliant. You thought if you lowered your head enough, they would eventually stop hitting you." I looked at the folder. "What is that?" "That," she said, nodding at the file, "is the end of your martyrdom." She leaned forward, and for a moment, the dim hospital light caught the reflection in her eyes, making them look like cold steel. "You are a Weatherford. We do not beg for scraps at the table of people who hate us. Beatrice Sterling thinks she has crushed you. She thinks you are a helpless girl with no resources, no family, and no future." Grandma Rose reached out and placed her hand over mine. Her grip was surprisingly strong. It was not the hand of a gardener. It was the hand of someone who had held things far heavier than a trowel. "Rest tonight, my dear. Save your strength, because tomorrow, you stop playing the obedient Cinderella." She patted my hand once, then sat back, her gaze fixed on the door as if daring anyone to enter. "Tomorrow, we remind them that even queens can be beheaded." The steady, rhythmic hiss of the ventilator in the ICU became a time machine, dragging me back from the precipice of death into the purgatory of the last 5 years. As the painkillers dripped into my veins, the sterile white ceiling dissolved, replaced by the oppressive, hand-painted frescoes of the Sterling estate. If I wanted to understand how I ended up broken and alone in a hospital bed, I had to look back at the beginning. I had to look at the day I walked into the lion's den wearing a dress from a department store sale rack, thinking love was a shield strong enough to deflect gold-plated bullets. It was 5 years ago. I was 26, a promising architect at Vertex Design Group, fueled by coffee and the naive belief that talent mattered more than pedigree. I met Liam at a gallery opening. He was charming, self-deprecating, and seemed almost embarrassed by the weight of his own last name. We fell in love with the reckless speed of 2 people running away from opposite worlds. I was running from a life of quiet struggle. He was running from a life of loud expectations. Then came the introduction to the matriarch. The Sterling estate was not a home, it was a museum of intimidation. I remember walking through the front doors, my hands sweating in Liam's grip. Beatrice Sterling awaited us in the drawing room, sitting on a velvet armchair that looked suspiciously like a throne. She did not rise, she merely tilted her head, her eyes scanning me like a diamond merchant inspecting a gem for flaws. "So this is Emily," she said. The way she pronounced my name made it sound like a mild infection. "Liam tells me you design houses. I am an architect, Mrs. Sterling," I corrected gently. proud of the license I had worked 2 jobs to earn. I work for Vertex Design Group. We specialize in sustainable urban renewal. Beatrice laughed. It was a dry, brittle sound, like dry leaves being crushed. How quaint! It is adorable that you have a little hobby to keep you busy. Dear, but in this family, we build skylines, not community gardens. That was the first strike. She stripped me of my professional identity in 3 sentences. I looked at Liam, waiting for him to correct her, to explain that I was a senior associate, not a hobbyist, but Liam just smiled that tight, apologetic smile I would come to know so well. He squeezed my hand and said nothing. That silence was the foundation of our marriage. Liam Sterling was a good man in the way a domesticated bird is a good animal. He was gentle and kind, but his wings had been clipped so early he did not even know he was supposed to fly. He controlled nothing. Beatrice held the strings to his trust fund, his career, and his self-worth. She pulled, and he danced. The wedding preparations were a masterclass in humiliation, culminating in the prenuptial agreement. I remember the day Beatrice slid the document across the mahogany table in her study. It was thick, heavy, and smelled of expensive laser printer ink. "It is just a formality, Emily," she said, sipping her tea. "To protect the family legacy. I am sure a girl from your background understands the need to safeguard assets." I read the terms. It was not an agreement. It was an ultimatum. If we divorced for any reason, I walked away with nothing, no alimony, no claim to marital assets. If I was found to be unfaithful, a clause defined so loosely it could include smiling at a waiter, I would owe the Sterling estate legal fees. "I am marrying Liam for love, not his money," I said, pushing the paper back. "I will sign it. I thought I was being noble. I thought I was proving my purity. I did not see the predatory gleam in Beatrice's eyes. I did not realize that by signing that paper, I was handing her the knife she would eventually use to carve me out of her son's life. I had removed the only leverage I had. To her, I was no longer a threat. I was a temporary inconvenience that could be discarded cost-free. The years that followed were a blur of microaggressions and calculated cruelty. Beatrice did not attack me with shouting matches. She attacked me with etiquette. She would host elaborate dinner parties and seat me next to the kitchen door. She would forget to invite me to family photos. She would introduce me to senators and oil tycoons as Liam's little wife, never mentioning my name. But the incident that truly broke something inside me happened 2 years into the marriage. It was the annual Sterling Gala. I wore a simple navy gown, the only thing I could afford that fit the dress code. As Beatrice kept Liam on such a tight allowance, we often had to debate between dry cleaning and groceries. Beatrice was wearing the sterling sapphire, a necklace worth more than the entire neighborhood I grew up in. Halfway through the dinner, amidst the clinking of silver and the murmur of polite conversation, Beatrice let out a theatrical gasp. "My necklace!" she cried, clutching her throat. "It is gone." The room went silent. Security was called. Guests were looking at each other with suspicion. Then, Beatrice turned her cold eyes toward me. "Emily, dear," she said, her voice dripping with faux concern. "You were admiring it in the powder room earlier. Perhaps it got caught on your dress?" "I didn't touch it. Beatrice," I said, my face burning. "Let us just check your purse, to be safe," she insisted. Before I could object, she signaled the head of security. He opened my clutch. There, nestled between my lipstick and my phone, was the blue shimmer of the sapphire. The silence that followed was deafening. I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked at Liam. "I didn't take it. You have to believe me. Liam, I don't know how it got there." Liam looked at the necklace, then at his mother, and finally at me. His eyes were filled with pain, but also doubt. He didn't stand up and roar that his wife was not a thief. He didn't accuse his mother of planting it. "Mom," Liam said, his voice trembling, "let's just not make a scene. I am sure it was an accident." Beatrice smiled. A terrifying, benevolent smile. Of course, darling. We all know Emily comes from a difficult background. Sometimes old habits are hard to break. We will say no more about it. She didn't call the police. She did something worse. She forgave me, by forgiving me for a crime I didn't commit. She branded me a thief forever in the eyes of Chicago society. She owned me. From that night on, every time I entered a room, I saw people checking their watches and clutching their pearls. I endured it. I swallowed the bile and the shame because I loved Liam, and I believed that if I just loved him enough, I could save him from her. I was so busy fighting my own battles that I failed to protect the one person who actually mattered. Grandma Rose, to Beatrice. My grandmother was the ultimate punchline. The peasant woman, she called her, because Rose lived in a small cottage, wore knitted cardigans, and grew prize-winning hydrangeas. Beatrice assumed she was simple. She assumed Rose was poor. "Do not bring her here, Emily," Beatrice had said once when I suggested inviting Grandma for Christmas. "The smell of fertilizer lingers, and I just had the upholstery cleaned. Besides, she would not know which fork to use. It would be cruel to embarrass her." So I kept them apart. I visited Grandma Rose in secret, sitting in her warm kitchen, drinking tea and lying about how happy I was. I told myself I was protecting Grandma from Beatrice's venom. I did not know then that Grandma Rose was not the one who needed protecting. The irony of Beatrice's disdain for my common background was that I was the one saving her empire from collapsing. 3 years ago, the Sterling Group faced a massive lawsuit. The designs for their new waterfront luxury complex were structurally unsound. The ventilation shafts were misplaced, creating a fire hazard that would have failed inspection and cost them millions in delays. Liam was frantic. He brought the blueprints home, weeping into his scotch, terrified of telling his mother the project was doomed. I stayed up for 3 nights straight. I redrew the schematics. I reconfigured the load-bearing walls. I fixed the ventilation system using a technique I had developed at Vertex. I saved the project. Liam took the plans to the board meeting the next day. He promised me he would tell them I did it. He promised. That evening, Beatrice came over for a celebratory dinner. She raised a glass of champagne. "To my brilliant son," she toasted. "Who fixed the mess those incompetent contractors made?" The board was impressed. "Liam, you finally showed some sterling intuition." I looked at Liam. He was staring at his plate. "Liam," I said softly. He looked up, his eyes pleading. "It is just easier this way. She is happy. For once, she is proud of me. Let her have this." Beatrice smirked over the rim of her glass. She knew. She knew I had done the work. She simply didn't care. To her. My talent was just another asset of Liam's to be exploited. I was not a person. I was a resource. But the final straw, the act that paved the road to my accident, was the pregnancy. When the stick turned pink, I felt a surge of joy so pure it almost washed away the years of misery. I thought this would change everything. A baby, a grandchild. Surely, a new life would soften even Beatrice's granite heart. We announced it at Sunday brunch. Liam was beaming, holding my hand. "Mom, we are having a baby." Beatrice did not smile. She did not cry. She slowly cut a piece of steak, put it in her mouth, and chewed thoroughly before setting down her fork. "Are we?" she asked. "What do you mean?" Liam asked, his smile faltering. "I mean," Beatrice said, wiping her mouth with a linen napkin, "that the timing is convenient, isn't it? Just as I was discussing restructuring the family trust." She turned her gaze on me. It was not the gaze of a grandmother. It was the gaze of a prosecutor. "I want a paternity test," she declared. "Mom!" Liam shouted. It was the first time in 5 years I had heard him raise his voice. "That is my wife. She is a woman who has access to your bank accounts and a history of moral flexibility," Beatrice said, referencing the necklace incident she had staged. "I will not have the sterling fortune diluted by outside blood. I want an amniocentesis, immediately." "That is invasive," I said, my hands instinctively covering my stomach. It carries a risk of miscarriage. I am not doing that to my baby. If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear, Beatrice said coldly. Refuse, and I will cut Liam off. No access to the accounts, no position at the company. You will be out on the street with your little bastard before the sun sets. Liam looked at me. The fear was back in his eyes. The momentary bravery had evaporated. He whispered. Maybe we just do it? To shut her up? It is safe, right? Doctors do it all the time. I looked at my husband, the father of my child, and I saw a stranger. He was willing to risk our child's life to keep his mother's credit cards. That was the moment the marriage actually died. The accident that happened weeks later, the physical crash on the rainy highway, was just the final punctuation mark. The real collision had happened in that dining room, when I realized that to the Sterling family, I was not a human being. I was an incubator, a thief, and a problem to be solved. But as I lay in that hospital bed, remembering the humiliation, the stolen work, and the threats against my unborn son, a new feeling began to rise through the haze of pain. It wasn't sadness anymore. It wasn't fear. It was clarity. Beatrice had made one fatal miscalculation. She thought she had broken me. She did not realize that by stripping away everything I had to lose, she had set me free. She had turned the obedient Cinderella into something much more dangerous, and she had absolutely no idea who my grandmother really was. The months of my pregnancy were not measured in weeks or trimesters. They were measured in the tightening of the noose around my neck. While other expectant mothers were decorating nurseries and debating names, I was living in a state of high-alert siege warfare within my own home. Beatrice Sterling did not attack with shouting or violence. Her weapon of choice was psychological erosion. She wanted me to feel crazy. She wanted me to feel paranoid. Above all, she wanted me to feel that I was the intruder in my own marriage. It started with the shadow. Everywhere I went, a gray sedan followed 2 car lengths behind. When I went to the grocery store, a man in a beige coat was pretending to read the labels on the cereal boxes in the same aisle. When I went to my prenatal checkups, he was in the waiting room, hiding behind a newspaper. Beatrice had hired a private investigator. She was not even trying to be subtle about it. She wanted me to know I was being watched. She was hunting for a mistake, a slip, a secret lover, anything she could photograph and slap onto a divorce petition. I tried to tell Liam, "You are being hormonal, Emily," he said, packing his suitcase. He was not looking at me. He was looking at his collection of silk ties. "Mom is just protective. She worries about your safety. That man is probably security she hired for you. He takes photos of me. Liam," I insisted, my hand resting on the swell of my stomach. "Security guards do not hide in bushes." Liam sighed, the sound of a man exhausted by a problem he refused to understand. "Look, I have to go. This Tokyo deal is huge. It is the future of the company. Mom says I am the only one who can close it." That was the masterstroke, the isolation. Beatrice had manufactured a crisis in the Japanese division, a crisis that required the physical presence of the Sterling heir for an indefinite period. She was shipping Liam to the other side of the world, stripping me of the only person who might have stood between me and her cruelty. "When will you be back?" I asked, feeling a cold panic settling in my chest. "A few weeks, a month, maybe," he said, kissing my forehead. It was a dry, distracted kiss. "Don't stress. It is bad for the baby." The moment the door closed behind him, the temperature in the house seemed to drop 20 degrees. I was alone with her. 2 days after Liam left, I went to the pharmacy to pick up my prescription for prenatal vitamins and iron supplements. My doctor had been concerned about my blood pressure, stress, obviously, and wanted me on a strict regimen. I handed the pharmacist my credit card, the black card with the Sterling family crest, the one Liam had given me with a flourish on our honeymoon. "I am sorry, Mrs. Sterling," the young woman behind the counter said, lowering her voice. "This card has been declined." "That is impossible," I said. forcing a laugh. Try it again. It is probably the chip. She tried it again. Declined. Code 05. Do you have another form of payment? I pulled out the secondary card. Declined. I stood there, my face burning, feeling the eyes of the people in the line boring into my back. I had to pay with the $40 of emergency cash I kept in my wallet, counting out the crumpled bills with shaking hands. When I got to my car, I called the family office. The accountant, a man named Henderson, who had worked for Beatrice since the Reagan administration, answered on the first ring. Mrs. Sterling, he said, his voice smooth and unapologetic. Yes, Beatrice instructed us to put a temporary freeze on the auxiliary accounts. The company is facing some significant cash flow challenges this quarter. We are all tightening our belts. Tightening our belts? I nearly screamed. I couldn't pay for my medicine. Does Liam know about this? Mr. Sterling is in high-level meetings in Tokyo and cannot be disturbed, Henderson replied. Beatrice suggested that perhaps you could dip into your own savings for personal expenses. Surely a modern woman like yourself has a nest egg. She knew exactly how much I had. She knew I had spent most of my savings paying off my student loans before the wedding. She knew I had practically nothing. For the next 3 weeks, I lived off the meager savings I had left. I bought groceries at the discount market 3 towns over, so none of the society wives would see me using coupons. I stopped going to the expensive OBGYN Beatrice had selected and went to a free clinic for a checkup, wearing a hoodie so no one would recognize the Sterling's daughter-in-law sitting on a plastic chair. I could have called Grandma Rose. 1 phone call, and she would have been there. She would have brought soup, money, comfort, but I didn't. I told myself it was because I didn't want to worry her. She was old, I reasoned. She had high blood pressure. I didn't want to burden her with my failing marriage. But deep down, it was shame. I was ashamed that the fairy tale she had warned me about had turned into a horror story. I wanted to fix it myself. I wanted to prove I could survive them. That pride nearly killed me. The summons came on a Tuesday. It was raining, a relentless gray downpour that battered the windows of the estate. The house intercom buzzed. Mrs. Sterling requests your presence in the library. The maid's voice crackled. I walked down the long marble hallway. The house felt like a mausoleum. The portraits of dead Sterling seemed to sneer at me as I passed. Beatrice was sitting behind her massive oak desk. She wasn't working. She was waiting. Sit down, she said, not looking up from a document she was reading. I sat. The chair was hard, uncomfortable, designed to make the occupant feel small. Beatrice finally looked up. Her face was a mask of perfect, icy composure. She slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a check. I looked at the numbers. $500,000. What is this? I asked. A severance package, she said calmly. I am buying out your contract. I am your son's wife, Beatrice, not an employee. You are a liability, she corrected. Liam is weak. He confuses lust with love and pity with duty. He will never leave you on his own because he is too afraid of looking like the bad guy. So, I am making it easy for you. She leaned forward, clasping her hands. Her nails were painted a blood red that matched the rug. Here is the deal. You take that check, you cash it, you pack a bag, you leave Chicago tonight, you file for divorce from a jurisdiction of my choosing. Nevada is quick, citing irreconcilable differences, and the child. She paused, looking at my stomach with undisguised disgust. You have 2 options regarding the pregnancy. 1, you terminate it. There are clinics in Europe that handle late-term procedures discreetly. 2, you have the child. Sign over full custody to the Sterling family, and disappear. We will raise it properly. We will scrub the common out of its blood. The air left the room. I looked at the check. $500,000. It was more money than my parents had made in their entire lives. It was freedom. It was safety. And it was the price of my soul. Something snapped inside me. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet, metallic sound of a lock clicking into place. I reached out and picked up the check. Beatrice's lips curled into a smug smile. She thought she had won. She thought everyone had a price. I stood up. I held the check in front of her face, and then, slowly, deliberately, I tore it in half, then in quarters, then into confetti. I let the pieces flutter down onto her pristine desk like snow. "My son," I said, my voice shaking not with fear, but with a rage I had never felt before, "is not for sale, and neither am I. I am going to wait for Liam to come home. I am going to tell him everything. I am going to tell him you starved his wife and tried to buy his child." Beatrice stood up. She was tall. But in that moment, she seemed to loom like a shadow monster. The veneer of civility vanished. Her face twisted into a snarl. "You stupid, insolent little girl," she hissed. "Do you think Liam will believe you? I control the narrative. I control the money. I control him. He will believe the mother of his child," I said, turning to the door. "If you walk out that door," Beatrice's voice followed me, low and dangerous, "you are declaring war, and I have nukes, Emily. You have a slingshot. If you leave this house today, I will make sure you cease to exist in this city. You will not get a job. You will not get an apartment. You will be destitute. And that child? I will bury you in so many lawsuits you will be begging me to take him just so he doesn't starve." "I would rather starve than let him be raised by a monster," I said. I walked out. I didn't pack a bag. I just grabbed my keys and my purse. I needed to get away. I needed to go to Grandma Rose. I didn't care about the shame anymore. I just needed safety. I ran out into the rain. I headed for the garage where my SUV, a sturdy vehicle Liam had bought for the baby's safety, was parked, but the spot was empty. The garage manager, a man named Davis who always looked at the floor when he spoke to me, shuffled forward. "Where is my car?" "Davis?" I demanded. "Mrs. Sterling, the elder, Mrs. Sterling, she ordered it to be taken in for service," he mumbled. "She said there was a recall on the airbags. It was towed an hour ago." "I need a car," I said, panic rising. "I need to leave. Now. The only thing available is the pool sedan," he said, gesturing to the back corner. It was a 10-year-old compact car that the housekeeping staff used to run errands. It was dusty, dented, and sat low to the ground. "Give me the keys," I said. I didn't care. I just had to get out of there. I had to get to Grandma Rose's house in the suburbs. It was a 40-minute drive. I could make it. I threw myself into the driver's seat. The engine sputtered before coughing to life. The windshield wipers were old and streaky, smearing the torrential rain rather than clearing it. I peeled out of the driveway, the iron gates of the Sterling estate closing behind me like the jaws of a beast I had just escaped. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. The rain was blinding. The wind shook the small, lightweight car. I was crying. Great heaving sobs that fogged up the glass. I drove onto the highway, merging into the aggressive evening traffic. I needed to call Liam. I reached for my phone, but my hands were shaking too much. "Focus," I told myself. "Just drive. Get to Grandma's." I was approaching the exit for the old industrial district, a shortcut that would shave 10 minutes off the trip. The road there was less crowded. I signaled and took the ramp. The car felt wrong. It felt heavy, unresponsive. I approached a sharp curve. The speed limit sign said 35 miles per hour. I was doing 50. I lifted my foot off the accelerator and pressed the brake pedal. Nothing happened. The pedal went all the way to the floor with zero resistance. It felt like stepping into a bucket of water. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my veins. I pumped the pedal, once, twice, 3 times, nothing, no friction, no slowing down. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." The car was picking up speed on the decline. The speedometer climbed. 55, 60. I yanked the emergency brake handle. It came up loose in my hand. The cable snapped. I was a passenger in a missile. The intersection was coming up fast. The light was red. I could see the cross traffic. I could see the heavy headlights of a truck moving through the green light perpendicular to me. I slammed my hand on the horn. A long, desperate wail. I tried to steer away, to aim for the guardrail, for a tree, for anything that wasn't that intersection. But the tires lost traction on the slick oil and water of the road. The car hydroplaned. The steering wheel spun uselessly in my hands. The last thing I thought of before the world turned into blinding lights and screaming metal was not Liam. It was not Beatrice. It was the fluid. The brake fluid. I remembered seeing a small, dark puddle on the garage floor where the pool car had been parked. I had ignored it. I had been in too much of a hurry. Beatrice hadn't just threatened to destroy me. She had handed me the keys to my own coffin. The world did not end with a whimper. It ended with the screaming tear of steel against steel. I had drifted into the intersection, my foot pumping the useless brake pedal. A silent prayer trapped in my throat. To my left, the traffic light turned green for the cross street. I saw the headlights first. They were blindingly bright. Mounted high on the grill of a massive delivery truck, the driver must have been trying to beat the light, or perhaps he was distracted by the storm. He did not slow down. He did not swerve. The impact was absolute. The truck slammed into the driver's side of my small sedan with the force of a freight train. The sound was not like a car crash in the movies. It was a physical blow, a concussive blast that shattered the air itself. My car was lifted off the wet asphalt, thrown sideways like a discarded toy. I felt the frame of the vehicle buckle around me. The window exploded inward, showering me with a hail of safety glass that bit into my skin like 1,000 angry insects. I spun. Once, twice, the world outside was a kaleidoscope of rain, streetlights, and darkness. Then, we hit a concrete utility pole. The car stopped dead. The sudden deceleration slammed me against the side of the door, and I felt the sickening crunch of my ribs giving way. Silence followed, a heavy ringing silence that drowned out the storm. I was pinned. The dashboard had collapsed onto my legs. My left arm was twisted at an unnatural angle. Blood, warm and sticky, was running down my forehead and into my left eye, blinding me. But I did not care about my legs. I did not care about my arm. My hands, miraculously, were still clutched around my stomach. "Baby," I gasped. The word was a bubble of blood in my mouth. "Leo!" I tried to move, but a jagged spike of pain radiated through my chest, stealing my breath. I looked down. The steering column was pressed against my lower abdomen. Panic, cold and primal, flooded my system. I was trapped. I was bleeding, and my baby was trapped with me. Sirens. I heard them in the distance. They sounded like they were underwater. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" A face appeared in the shattered window. A police officer. He was soaking wet, his yellow raincoat slick with rain. He shone a flashlight into the car. I flinched. "She is pinned!" he shouted to someone behind him. "Get the fire department. We need the jaws. Hurry!" He reached in and took my hand. "Profound trauma," he said into his radio. "Female driver, approximately 7 months pregnant, losing consciousness." "My husband," I whispered, squeezing his hand with the last ounce of strength I possessed. "Call Liam. We will find him," the officer promised. "Just stay with me." He reached for my purse, which had been thrown onto the floorboard. He dug out my wallet and found my license. He looked for my phone, but it was gone, smashed somewhere in the twisted wreckage of the back seat. "Dispatch, I have an ID," he yelled over the sound of the rain. "Emily Sterling, contact the emergency numbers listed in the state database, now." While the firefighters began the terrifying mechanical shriek of cutting the door off my car. The police dispatch was making the most important phone call of my life. 5 miles away, the grand ballroom of the Palmer House Hotel was bathed in the warm golden glow of crystal chandeliers. It was the annual Angel's Heart Gala, a charity event raising money for pediatric cardiology. The irony was thick enough to choke on. Beatrice Sterling stood at the center of the room, a glass of vintage champagne in her hand. She was wearing a silver gown that cost more than the car I had just destroyed, A diamond choker sparkled at her throat. She was laughing at a joke made by the mayor. Her head thrown back in a practiced display of elegance, a waiter approached her with a silver tray, holding her phone. "Mrs. Sterling," he whispered discreetly. "Your private line is ringing. It is marked urgent." Beatrice frowned, annoyed at the interruption. She checked the screen. An unknown number. She almost sent it to voicemail. But the persistent buzzing forced her hand. She excused herself and stepped into a slightly quieter alcove, though the strains of a string quartet were still audible. "This is Beatrice Sterling," she said, her voice sharp. "Mrs. Sterling? This is Dr. Evans from Northwestern Memorial Trauma Center," a voice on the other end said, urgent and breathless. "Your daughter-in-law, Emily Sterling, has been involved in a catastrophic motor vehicle accident. She is in critical condition. We need to perform an emergency cesarean section immediately to save the baby, but we cannot reach her husband. We need your authorization to proceed with high-risk surgery." Beatrice paused. She looked out at the ballroom. She saw the photographers near the stage. She saw the senator walking toward her table. This was her night. She was the star. A scandal involving a car crash, a commoner, daughter-in-law, and a potentially dead or disabled grandchild would ruin the aesthetic of her evening. It would be messy. She took a sip of champagne. "Doctor," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "I think you have the wrong number. My daughter-in-law is currently at home, resting. We have had issues with a stalker recently who has been impersonating family members to get attention. Mrs. Sterling, we have her ID," the doctor insisted, his voice rising in disbelief. "She is dying. The fetal heart rate is decelerating rapidly. I am telling you, it is a scam," Beatrice said smoothly. "I am at a charity gala for children right now. I would know if my family was in danger. Do not call this number again, or I will report you for harassment." She ended the call. She handed the phone back to the waiter with a dismissive wave. She smoothed the front of her dress, checked her reflection in a nearby mirror to ensure her lipstick was perfect, and walked back into the party. "Is everything all right, Beatrice?" the mayor asked, as she returned. "Oh, just a nuisance call," she smiled, a predator showing its teeth. "Someone trying to sell me solar panels. Can you imagine? At this hour?" Back in the trauma bay, Dr. Evans stared at the phone in his hand, his face pale with shock. He looked at the nurse. "She hung up," he said. "She said it was a scam." "Doctor, the patient's pressure is 60/40, the anesthesiologist shouted. "Fetal heart tones are down to 80. We are losing them both." "Doctor," Evans threw the phone against the wall. It shattered. "To hell with authorization," he roared. "Prepping for emergency section. Get her to OR. One now. If I get sued, I get sued. I am not letting two people die because of a rich woman's ego." They began to run. The gurney rattled violently as they sprinted down the hallway. I was drifting in and out of consciousness. The lights overhead were blurring into long streaks of white. I couldn't feel my legs anymore. The pain in my chest was a dull, distant fire. "Hold on, Emily," a nurse was whispering in my ear. "Stay with us." I wanted to tell her that I was trying. I wanted to tell her that I was scared. But the darkness was so heavy. It was pulling me down like a lead weight. In a quiet study 40 minutes outside the city, a red telephone on an antique oak desk began to ring. It was an encrypted line, a relic from a past life that very few people knew about. Grandma Rose was sitting in her rocking chair, knitting a small blue blanket. She stopped. She looked at the phone. No one called that number unless the world was burning. She picked it up. "Speak." "Madam," a deep, distorted voice said, "Code Black. Subject Emily. Mercy Hospital refused admission due to insurance block. Rerouted to Northwestern Trauma. Head-on collision. Status critical. The matriarch refused the emergency call." Rose did not gasp. She did not cry. Her hand tightened around the receiver until her knuckles turned white. "The baby?" she asked. "Distress. Immediate surgery required." Rose stood up. The knitting fell to the floor, the blue yarn unspooling across the Persian rug. The kindly grandmother vanished. The Iron Lady returned. "Initiate protocol Ghost," she commanded. Her voice was not the voice of a gardener. It was the voice of a woman who had once commanded boardrooms that made the Sterling Empire look like a lemonade stand. "I want the Pegasus team airborne in 3 minutes. Get Dr. Eris Thorne out of bed. I don't care if he's in London or New York. Get him on a video link to the trauma theater. And secure the VIP wing at Northwestern. I am paying for the entire floor." "Understood. And the cover story?" "There is no cover story," Rose said, her eyes cold as winter ice. "Tonight, we operate in the shadows. Tomorrow, we hunt." She hung up. She walked to her closet and pushed aside the floral dresses. Behind them was a safe. She spun the dial. Inside lay a stack of black credit cards and a satellite phone. She took them. I was on the operating table. They were cutting my clothes off. I felt the cold splash of antiseptic on my stomach. "No time for a spinal block. Doctor," Evans yelled. "General anesthesia. Put her under. Hurry!" A mask was placed over my face. The chemical smell was sharp and choking. "Count backward from 10. Emily," a voice said. 10. I thought, Leo. 9. Please live. 8. Liam, where are you? The darkness swallowed me whole. Seconds later, the scalpel bit into my skin. "Doctor." Evans worked with the speed of a man possessed. He cut through the layers of tissue, bypassing the muscle, reaching into the womb that had become a tomb. Blood poured onto the floor. The damage from the seatbelt was severe. There was internal bleeding everywhere. "Uterus is ruptured," he announced grimly. "I have the baby." He reached in and pulled. The room went silent. A tiny purple body was lifted into the harsh surgical light. He was small, so incredibly small. His limbs hung limp. He was not moving. He was not breathing. "Clamp, doctor," Evans barked. He cut the cord. He handed the lifeless infant to the NICU team, waiting with a heated isolette. "Come on, little one," the neonatologist whispered, rubbing the baby's chest vigorously with a towel. "Come on, fight." Nothing. "Suctioning the airway," the nurse said. "Still nothing. Doctor." Evans looked back at me. My heart monitor was wailing a high-pitched warning. "She is crashing. We have a bleeder in the retroperitoneal space." "Doctor, the baby!" the nurse cried out. And then, a sound. It was weak at first. A tiny, gargling gasp. Then a cough. And then, a thin, high-pitched cry that cut through the chaos of the operating room like a clarion call. Leo. He was alive. He was 3 pounds of raw determination, defying the woman who had wished him dead. "He is breathing," the nurse said, tears visible above her mask. "He is breathing, doctor." Evans did not stop working on me. "Get him to the NICU. Now, I need more units of O-negative blood in here. We are not losing the mother today." Above the hospital, the thumping rhythm of a helicopter rotor blade began to shake the windows. The Pegasus team had arrived. Men in dark suits and medical cases were already running across the helipad, carrying equipment that the hospital budget could never afford. Grandma Rose's cavalry was here. But as the anesthesia pulled me deeper into the void, I didn't know if I would ever wake up to see them. I drifted in a black ocean, untethered, floating between the life I had lost and the uncertain future that awaited me. The silence in the VIP suite of Northwestern Memorial Hospital was not the silence of emptiness. It was the silence of expensive insulation. The room did not smell of bleach and sickness. It smelled of fresh orchids and the faint, comforting scent of lavender that always clung to my grandmother's cardigans. I had been awake for 3 hours. The pain was still there, a constant, dull roar beneath my ribs, but the panic had subsided, replaced by a surreal sense of dislocation. I watched Grandma Rose. She was sitting in a leather armchair by the window, peeling an apple with a small paring knife. The ribbon of skin fell away in one perfect, unbroken spiral. She was not the woman I thought I knew. The Grandma Rose I grew up with wore worn-out slippers and worried about the price of heating oil in the winter. The woman sitting before me was wearing a tailored charcoal blazer that I now realized was cashmere. Her posture was not that of a retired florist. It was the posture of a monarch in exile. "Grandma," I rasped. My throat felt like it was lined with broken glass. She looked up immediately. The steel in her eyes softened, but only slightly. "Drink this," she said, holding a glass of water with a straw to my lips. "Small sips." I drank. The cool liquid was a blessing. "The bills," I whispered, looking around the expansive room. There was a kitchenette in the corner and a view of the Chicago skyline that suggested we were on the top floor. "The nurse said Beatrice blocked the insurance. This room must cost thousands of dollars a night. We can't afford this." Rose set the glass down. She went back to her apple. "Do not worry about the money, Emily." "I have to worry," I insisted, trying to shift my weight and wincing as my stitches pulled. "I have $40 in my wallet. Liam is in Japan. Beatrice." I choked on the name. "Beatrice left us to die." Rose stopped peeling. She placed the knife on the table with a deliberate click. "Beatrice Sterling made a choice," Rose said, her voice devoid of emotion. "And now, she will live with the consequences. But the money, Grandma, you are on a fixed income. You sell vegetables at the farmer's market." Rose smiled. It was a dry, cryptic smile. "The vegetable market has been very good to me over the years, child." She stood up and walked to the foot of my bed. She picked up the heavy manila folder she had placed there earlier. "You always wondered why I never visited the Sterling estate," she said. "You thought it was because I was ashamed of my poverty. You thought I was intimidated by their chandeliers and their servants." "Beatrice said you wouldn't know which fork to use," I said, the memory stinging. "I know exactly which fork to use," Rose said. "I also know which knife to use to cut a throat without getting blood on the tablecloth. I stayed away, Emily, because if I had walked into that house, Beatrice would have recognized me, or at least, she would have recognized the name." "What name?" "Legacy Holdings." I stared at her. "Legacy Holdings? The investment firm? The one that owns half the commercial real estate in the Loop? Liam is terrified of them. He says they hold the debt on the Sterling family hotels. They are the shark he's always complaining about." Rose nodded slowly. "I am Legacy Holdings, Emily." The room seemed to tilt. "What?" "I started it 40 years ago, after your grandfather died," she explained, her tone as casual as if she were discussing a recipe for apple pie. "I was good with numbers, better with leverage. I built an empire in the shadows because I wanted a quiet life for my daughter. And then for you. I wanted you to be loved for who you are, not for the size of your inheritance. I wanted to see if Liam Sterling loved Emily Weatherford, the architect, or if he was just another fortune hunter." She walked to the window and looked out at the city she silently owned. "I watched him," she continued. "Liam is not a bad boy, but he is a coward, and a coward is often more dangerous than a villain because he will stand by and watch while the villain destroys you." "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, tears welling in my eyes. "When Beatrice treated me like dirt when she made me beg for money." "Because you needed to see it," Rose said, turning back to me. "If I had stepped in, if I had written a check, Beatrice would have only respected the money, not you, and you would have spent your life making excuses for them. I needed you to see their true faces. I just never imagined." Her voice cracked. "Just for a fraction of a second. I never imagined she would go this far. I underestimated her depravity." She opened the folder. "But the time for observation is over. Now, we educate them." She pulled out a stack of documents and laid them on my blanket. They were bank statements, detailed transaction logs. "While you were sleeping, my auditors were busy," Rose said. "Beatrice claims the company is having cash flow problems. She told you that is why she froze your cards. That is why she cut the maintenance on your car." "Yes," I said. "She said the market was down." "The market is fine," Rose said, tapping a highlighted column of figures. The Sterling Group is bleeding money. Yes, but not because of the economy. It is bleeding because Beatrice is siphoning it. I looked at the papers. I saw transfers of $50,000, $100,000, recurring monthly, all going to a shell company called Aurora Consulting. What is Aurora Consulting? I asked. It is a fake entity registered in the Cayman Islands, Rose explained. But my team traced the IP addresses and the beneficiary accounts. The money is not going to consultants. It is going to a private account in Miami. She pulled out a photograph and placed it on top of the statements. It showed a young man, tanned and fit, standing next to a Porsche. He couldn't have been older than 25. Meet Julian, Rose said. He is her personal tennis instructor, and apparently, her very expensive hobby. I felt sick. She cut off my prenatal vitamins to buy him a Porsche? She embezzled funds from the company her son is supposed to inherit to keep her lover in luxury, Rose corrected. She is stealing from Liam, and she is using the financial crisis as an excuse to control him and abuse you. The door to the room burst open. I jumped, gasping as the movement flared the pain in my ribs. A nurse rushed in, looking flustered. I am so sorry to interrupt, she said, looking at Rose with deference. But the patient's husband is on the line. He has called the main switchboard 20 times in the last hour. He sounds hysterical. He says he is boarding a plane but demands to speak to his wife. I looked at Rose. Put him through, Rose said calmly. She handed me the receiver of the bedside phone. Remember, Emily, you are tired. You are in pain. You tell him nothing about me. You tell him nothing about the money or the embezzlement. Why? I whispered, clutching the phone. I want to scream the truth at him. Because if you tell him now, while he is panic-stricken, he might not believe it. Or worse, he will call Beatrice and she will have time to cover her tracks, Rose whispered back, her eyes intense. He needs to walk into the lion's den without a weapon. He needs to see the monster with his own eyes. I nodded. I put the phone to my ear. Liam? Oh my God. Emily! Liam's voice was a jagged sob. I am at the airport in Tokyo. I just got the message. The storm cleared and my phone blew up. Are you okay? Is the baby okay? The message said, emergency surgery crash. I don't understand. We are alive. Liam, I said, keeping my voice flat. Leo is in the NICU. I have 3 broken ribs and a punctured lung. I am coming home, he cried. I am getting on the first flight. I will be there in 14 hours. I called Mom. But she isn't picking up. Where is she? Is she with you? I looked at Grandma Rose. She shook her head slightly. No, Liam, I said. She is not here. I am alone. Alone? What do you mean, alone? She is the emergency contact. I told her to look after you. Just come home, Liam, I said. We can talk when you get here. I love you. I am so sorry. I am so sorry I wasn't there. I hung up. The I love you felt like ash in my mouth. Good, Rose said. Now, rest. You need your strength for the second act. She picked up a remote control and turned on the flat-screen television mounted on the wall. But first, you need to see what we are up against. The screen flickered to life. It was a local Chicago news channel. The banner at the bottom read, Sterling Family Tragedy, and there she was, Beatrice. She was standing on the steps of the Sterling estate, surrounded by microphones. She was wearing black. She had dabbed water on her cheeks to simulate tears. She looked devastated. It was an Oscar-worthy performance. We are heartbroken, Beatrice was saying into the cameras, clutching a handkerchief. My daughter-in-law, Emily, we have tried so hard to help her. We knew she was struggling with personal demons. We tried to get her into rehab for the drinking, but she wouldn't go. My jaw dropped. She is saying I was drunk? Listen, Rose commanded. We begged her not to drive last night, Beatrice continued, wiping her dry eyes. But she took the car keys and stormed out. It is a miracle she didn't kill anyone else. We are just praying for the baby and hoping that this tragedy serves as a wake-up call for her to get the help she needs. A reporter shouted a question. Mrs. Sterling, sources say the hospital called you and you refused to come. Is that true? Beatrice looked shocked. That is an absolute lie. I was at a charity gala, raising money for sick children. My phone was with my assistant. We rushed to the hospital the moment we heard, but the doctors said she was unstable and couldn't see visitors. Please, give our family privacy. She turned and walked back into the mansion. I stared at the black screen as Rose turned it off. She is destroying me, I whispered. She is painting me as a drunk driver. I wasn't drinking. I had orange juice. The toxicology report will prove it. The toxicology report will take weeks to be made public, Rose said. By then, the court of public opinion will have already convicted you. She is setting the stage to take custody of Leo. She will argue that you are an unfit mother, an alcoholic who endangered her child. She can't do that. I tried to sit up, but the pain forced me back. Liam won't let her. Liam believes what she tells him, Rose reminded me. He will come back. She will cry. She will show him fake bottles of vodka she planted in your closet, and he will doubt you. Just like he did with the necklace. Rose stood. She walked to the door and opened it. A man in a sharp navy suit walked in. He was carrying a briefcase. This is Mr. Vance, Rose said. He is the head of my legal department at Legacy. Mr. Vance nodded to me. Mrs. Sterling, it is an honor. Mr. Vance, Rose said, her voice sharp and commanding. Beatrice has played her card. Now we play ours. I want the dashcam footage from Emily's car. The police have it impounded. The police chief owes me a favor, Vance said. We will have the raw footage by noon. It will show the brake failure. Good, Rose said. And the phone records? We have already subpoenaed the telecom provider, Vance replied. We have the timestamp of the hospital's call to Beatrice's private line, and thanks to the waiter at the gala, who was very happy to accept a generous tip, we have a witness statement confirming she took the call and dismissed it. Rose turned to me. Her expression was grim but satisfied. Beatrice thinks she is fighting a scared girl from the suburbs, Rose said. She thinks she can lie to the press and bury the truth under a pile of money. She does not know that I have been buying her debt for 5 years. She does not know that I own the mortgage on her house, the lien on her car, and the credit line for her company. She reached out and smoothed the hair back from my forehead. Sleep now, my dear. When Liam arrives, the trap will be set. Beatrice wants a show? We will give her a show, but the ending will be very different from the one she has written. I closed my eyes. The image of Beatrice's fake tears burning in my mind. I wasn't afraid anymore. I felt a strange, cold calm settling over me. I was no longer just a victim. I was the granddaughter of Rose Weatherford, and the house of Sterling was about to crumble. The door to the hospital suite flew open with enough force to bang against the rubber stopper on the wall. The noise made me flinch, sending a fresh spike of fire through my fractured ribs. But I did not cry out. I just watched. Liam stood in the doorway. He looked like a man who had been dragged through a hurricane. His expensive Italian suit was rumpled, his tie was loosened and hanging askew, and his eyes were red-rimmed and wild. He was breathless, his chest heaving as if he had run all the way from O'Hare International Airport. He stared at me for a long, frozen second. He took in the cast on my arm, the bandage wrapped around my head, and the tubes connecting me to the monitors. Then his gaze flickered to the empty bassinet in the corner, a cruel reminder that our son was fighting for his life 3 floors down in the NICU. Emily, he choked out. He rushed to the bedside, falling to his knees. He buried his face in the mattress near my hand, his shoulders shaking with violent sobs. I am so sorry, he wept, his voice muffled by the bedding. I am so sorry. I should have been here. I should never have left. I looked down at the top of his head. His hair was matted with sweat. A week ago, this display of raw emotion would have melted me. I would have reached out, stroked his hair, and told him it was not his fault. I would have comforted him for my pain. But today, My hand remained still on the sheet. I felt a strange, clinical detachment. I was watching a stranger mourn a marriage that had already died on the operating table. "Did you see him?" I asked, my voice rasping. "Did you see Leo?" Liam lifted his head, tears streaming down his face. "I went to the NICU first. They let me look through the glass. He is so small. He is so incredibly small. There are so many wires." He wiped his nose with the back of his hand, reverting to the frightened boy he had always been. "God, I thought I lost you both. When I got the message when the plane was taxiing, I thought my life was over." Before I could answer, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The air grew heavy, charged with a sudden, suffocating perfume. Beatrice Sterling swept into the room. She did not come alone. Through the open door, I saw the flash of a camera bulb in the hallway before a security guard stepped in to close it. She had brought the press. She had brought an audience. Beatrice was carrying a massive bouquet of white lilies, the kind you buy for a funeral, not a recovery. She was dressed in a somber, tasteful charcoal dress, her makeup done to perfection to suggest a woman holding it together through sheer strength of will. "Oh, my poor children," she cried out, her voice pitched perfectly to carry to the hallway. She rushed past Grandma Rose, ignoring her completely, and threw her arms around Liam's shoulders, effectively pulling him away from me. "Liam, darling, thank God you are back," she wailed, clinging to him. "It has been a nightmare, an absolute nightmare." Liam turned and hugged his mother, burying his face in her shoulder. "Mom, I was so scared. No one was answering the phone." Beatrice pulled back, cupping his face in her hands. She looked at him with wet, shimmering eyes. "I know, sweetheart. I know. We have all been frantic." Then, she turned her gaze to me. The sadness in her eyes vanished instantly, replaced by a cold, sharp glint that only I could see, to Liam. She looked concerned, to me. She looked like a vulture inspecting a carcass. "Emily," she sighed, shaking her head with exaggerated disappointment. "Oh, Emily, why didn't you listen to me?" I stared at her. "Listen to you?" "I told you," Beatrice said, turning to Liam, her voice trembling with fake frustration. "I told her explicitly not to drive yesterday. I told her the weather was turning. I offered to send the driver, but she was so agitated. Liam, she was shouting about needing space, about needing to get out of the house. She grabbed the keys and just ran. The lie was so bold, so seamless, it took my breath away. 'You took my car,' I whispered. 'You had my car towed.'" Beatrice's eyes widened in shock. "I did no such thing. I sent your car for a safety inspection because I care about my grandson. I begged you to wait, but you insisted on taking that old pool car. You said you didn't care. You were well. You were not yourself, dear." She tapped her temple significantly, implying to Liam that I was hysterical, hormonal, or perhaps intoxicated. Liam looked from his mother to me. The confusion on his face was heartbreaking. He wanted to believe me. I could see it, but 5 years of conditioning were fighting against him. "And where were you?" Liam asked, his voice cracking. "The doctors." "Dr. Evans said the hospital called you. He said they needed authorization for the surgery, and you refused. He said you abandoned them." The room went deadly silent. This was the moment, the pivot point. Beatrice did not flinch. She did not stumble. She looked at Liam with an expression of utter devastation, as if he had just stabbed her in the heart. "Liam," she breathed, placing a hand over her chest. "How can you even ask me that? Do you think I would let my own flesh and blood die?" "They said they called you," Liam insisted, but his voice was already losing its edge. "I never got a call," Beatrice insisted, tears now spilling onto her cheeks. "The storm knocked out the cell towers near the gala. My phone had 0 signal for 3 hours. The moment I got the voicemail, I rushed here. I have been fighting with the hospital administrators all morning trying to get in to see her. But they wouldn't let me. They said only the husband could authorize visitors. She grabbed Liam's hands. I would have given my life for that baby. Liam, you know that. You know how much I wanted a grandchild. The idea that I would ignore a call is insulting. It is cruel. Liam slumped. The fight went out of him. He exhaled a long, shaky breath. He looked at his mother's tear-stained face, and he folded. I am sorry, Mom, he whispered. I didn't know about the cell towers. It was chaos. It is okay, Beatrice cooed, stroking his hair. I forgive you. You are stressed. We all are. She glanced over Liam's shoulder at the corner of the room. For the first time, she acknowledged the presence of the third person in the suite. Grandma Rose was sitting in the high-backed leather chair, a small paring knife in her hand. She was peeling a red apple. The skin came away in a long, continuous ribbon. She did not look up. She did not speak. She just peeled, the rhythmic click of the knife the only sound in the room. I see you brought the help, Beatrice said to me, her lip curling in a sneer. Or is the nursing staff so incompetent you had to call in the village elders? Liam turned and saw Rose. Grandma Rose, he said, surprised. I didn't know you were here. Rose sliced a piece of apple and ate it. She looked at Beatrice with eyes that were flat and hard as river stones. Hello, Liam. Hello, Beatrice. I see you managed to find a parking spot for your broomstick. Beatrice bristled. Charming as always. I suppose you came to beg for money for the hospital bill? Don't worry. The Sterling estate will cover the charity cases. Mom, stop, Liam said. But it was a weak protest. He turned back to me, his face full of conflict. He took my hand, but his grip was loose. He said softly. Why did you drive? If Mom offered the driver, why did you take the pool car? You know that thing is a death trap. It was reckless. The words hit me harder than the airbag had. Reckless. He was doing it. He was rewriting the narrative right in front of me. He was accepting her version of reality because it was easier than facing the truth that his mother was a monster. He was blaming me for the accident. I didn't have a choice, Liam, I said, my voice cold. She threatened me. She tried to buy me off. Buy you off? Liam looked confused. Oh, stop it, Emily, Beatrice snapped. Liam, she was having a breakdown. She was demanding money. She said if I didn't give her $500,000, she would leave you and take the baby. I told her no, and she stormed out in a rage. That is why she crashed. She was driving angry. That is a lie, I shouted, the effort making my chest burn. Liam squeezed my hand, but it wasn't a comfort. It was a restraint. Emily, calm down. Your blood pressure. Look, we can talk about this later. The important thing is that you are safe. Mom is here now. We are a family. We will get through this. He looked at me with pleading eyes. He wanted me to drop it. He wanted me to accept the lie so we could go back to the comfortable numbness of our life. He wanted peace at the cost of my dignity. I looked at him. I looked at the man I had married, the father of my child, and I realized that Grandma Rose was right. He wasn't a villain. He was just a coward, and I couldn't save him. I pulled my hand away from his. You are right, Liam, I said softly. We need to focus on facts. I looked over at Grandma Rose. She gave me a barely perceptible nod. I need the nurse, I said. I need to ask about the billing. If Beatrice says she is paying, I need to make sure the hospital knows. I will handle it, Beatrice said quickly, reaching for her purse. I will go down to billing right now. No, I said firmly. I want the head nurse. She was here a minute ago. Press the button. Liam. Liam looked confused but pressed the call button. Beatrice shifted her weight. Emily, really, this is not the time for administration. It is exactly the time, I said. The door opened. The head nurse walked in. She wasn't the usual floor nurse. She was an older woman with iron-gray hair and a face that brooked no nonsense. She was holding a clipboard. Grandma Rose had introduced her to me earlier as Mrs. Gable, an old friend from the board of directors who had come out of retirement just for this case. You rang, Mrs. Sterling? Mrs. Gable asked. Yes, I said. My mother-in-law, Mrs. Beatrice Sterling, is here. She says there was a misunderstanding about the insurance block and the emergency call last night. She says she never received the call due to a network error. Mrs. Gable adjusted her glasses. She looked at Beatrice. Beatrice straightened her spine, putting on her haughtiest expression. Yes, Beatrice said. I am Beatrice Sterling. I want the billing transferred to my private office immediately, and I want to know why your staff lied and said I refused the call. Mrs. Gable looked down at her clipboard. She flipped a page. The sound was loud in the quiet room. That is strange, Mrs. Gable said, her voice cool and professional. According to the federal medical records, which are automatically time-stamped for liability reasons, the call was answered at 8:42 p.m. The duration of the call was 45 seconds. Beatrice's face went pale beneath her makeup. That must be a voicemail recording. No, ma'am. Mrs. Gable continued, looking directly at Liam. The transcript of the conversation is logged in the refusal of treatment file. We are required by law to record calls when a guardian refuses life-saving surgery for a minor. Would you like me to read the transcript? Or perhaps play the audio file? We keep a digital backup on the server. Liam stiffened. Transcript? Yes, Mrs. Gable said. The respondent identified herself as Beatrice Sterling. The quote logged here says, I am in the middle of a dinner. Don't bother me again. That child is not a pureblood. Stop, Beatrice shrieked. The sound tore through the room. It wasn't the polished voice of a socialite. It was the desperate screech of a trapped animal. This is a violation of privacy, Beatrice yelled, her hands shaking. I will sue this hospital. I will own this place and turn it into a parking lot. Liam stepped back from his mother. He looked at her, then at the nurse, then at me. The doubt was creeping in. The cracks in the facade were starting to show. Mom? Liam asked. Why would they have a transcript if you didn't answer? Beatrice grabbed Liam's arm, her nails digging into his suit jacket. It is a fabrication. Liam, can't you see? They are trying to cover up their malpractice. They almost killed your wife. And now they are trying to blame me. We are leaving. Now. But Emily, Liam started. Emily is fine, Beatrice hissed. She needs rest. We need to go and call the lawyers. We need to get ahead of this before these incompetents leak fake news to the press. Come with me. Liam, now. She was pulling him physically toward the door. She looked terrified. She looked like a woman who could hear the sound of the executioner's axe sharpening in the distance. Liam looked at me one last time. He looked helpless. He looked torn. Go, I said. Go with your mother. Liam, go figure out the truth. I will be back, he stammered. I just need to sort this out. He let Beatrice drag him out of the room. The door swung shut behind them, cutting off Beatrice's frantic whispering. Silence returned to the suite. Mrs. Gable closed the clipboard. She looked at Grandma Rose and winked. Was that satisfactory, Mrs. Weatherford? Perfect. Margaret, Rose said, taking another slice of apple. Absolutely perfect. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. He went with her, I said, a bitter taste in my mouth. Even after that, he went with her. He had to, Rose said calmly. If he stayed, he would have asked questions we are not ready to answer yet. He needs to go home. He needs to see the empty safe. He needs to see the fake financial reports. He needs to sit in that big, empty house and let the doubt rot him from the inside out. She wiped the knife with a napkin and folded it away. The seed has been planted. Emily, now we wait for the rain. The door had barely clicked shut behind Liam and his mother before Grandma Rose moved. She did not waste a second on sentimentality. She reached into her oversized leather tote bag, the one that looked like it held knitting supplies but actually contained the leverage to topple an empire, and pulled out a thin, crisp file. He will be back, Rose said, her voice devoid of doubt. And when he comes back, he will be armed, Beatrice is not taking him to the billing department. Emily, she is taking him to the parking lot or the cafeteria to hand him a smoking gun, or at least, what she wants him to believe is a gun. What do you mean? I asked, pushing myself up against the pillows. The pain in my chest was a dull throb now, masked by the adrenaline of the hunt. Beatrice has been obsessed with bloodlines since the day you arrived, Rose explained, tapping the file on the tray table. She demanded an amniocentesis. You refused. Do you think a woman like that accepts no for an answer? I stared at her. She couldn't have. I never gave a sample. You live in her house, Rose said. You use her hairbrushes. You use her toothbrushes. Obtaining a DNA sample is child's play for someone with her resources. She ran the test 3 weeks ago. She used a private lab in the suburbs, one that specializes in discretion for high-net-worth clients. My stomach turned. And, Rose smiled, a cold, predatory baring of teeth. She buried the results because they didn't fit her narrative. Rose slid the file toward me. I opened it. It was a copy of a paternity test report from Genetics Prime Laboratory. I scanned the technical jargon until my eyes landed on the bottom line. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. Father, Liam Sterling. He is Liam's, I whispered, tears pricking my eyes. I knew it. I never doubted it. But she knows? She knows he is her grandson, and she still left him to die? She knows, Rose confirmed. Which means whatever she is showing Liam right now is a forgery. She is banking on his emotional fragility. She knows he is traumatized, exhausted, and desperate for an explanation that makes sense of this chaos. It is easier for him to believe you are a cheater than to believe his mother is a monster. Rose stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the street. Get ready, Emily. The storm is returning. It took 40 minutes. When the door opened this time, it wasn't the frantic entrance of a worried husband. It was the slow, heavy entrance of a judge walking into a courtroom to deliver a death sentence. Liam walked in. He was alone. Beatrice had stayed behind, likely waiting in the hallway to collect the pieces after he shattered. His face was unrecognizable. The grief and confusion were gone, replaced by a mask of cold, burning fury. His eyes were red, but not from tears. They were red from the fire of betrayal. He walked to the foot of my bed. He didn't look at me. He looked through me. Liam, I said softly. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a piece of paper. It was crumpled, as if he had been gripping it with lethal force. He threw it onto the bed. It landed on my legs, light as a feather but heavy as a tombstone. Read it, he said. His voice was unrecognizable. It was a stranger's voice. I picked up the paper. It was a letterhead from Genetics Prime Laboratory. It looked identical to the one Rose had just shown me. The font was the same, the logo was the same, but the numbers were different. Probability of paternity, 0%. Exclusion of paternity, confirmed. I looked up at him. Liam, this is fake. Don't, he snapped. The word was a whip crack. Just don't. Do not lie to me. Not anymore. He walked around the bed, pacing like a caged animal. Mom told me she had suspicions. She said you were too secretive. She said you were meeting someone. I didn't believe her. I defended you. I told her she was crazy. He laughed, a harsh, broken sound. She ran the test weeks ago to protect me. She didn't want to show me because she knew it would break my heart. But today, after the accident, she said I had to know. She said I was crying over a child that isn't even mine. He stopped pacing and turned to face me. His hands were shaking. Who is he? Emily? Was it someone from your old firm? Was it that guy from the gallery? Did you marry me for the money and then laugh at me behind my back with some lover? Liam, stop, I said. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt a cold calm settle over me, the kind of calm that comes when you realize you have nothing left to lose. Look at the dates on that paper. Look at the formatting. Beatrice made that on her computer. It is from the lab, Liam yelled, his control snapping. It has the seal. Why would she lie about this? Why would she make up something so sick? Because she hates me, I said. And she hates that I'm carrying your heir. She wants to erase me, Liam, and if erasing me means erasing your son, she will do it. He is not my son, Liam roared. He pointed a trembling finger at the door. Get out. As soon as the doctors clear you. Get out. I will pay for your medical bills, because I am not a monster. But then we are done. I am contacting the lawyers. I want an annulment based on fraud. This was it. The moment I had feared for 5 years. The moment Beatrice finally won. She had turned him. I looked at the man I loved. I looked at his blue eyes. The same blue eyes that were currently shut tight in the NICU downstairs. I will not leave, I said quietly. And I will not sign anything. You have no leverage, Liam shouted. I have proof. You have a piece of paper, I countered. I have reality. I pointed to the door. Go downstairs. Liam, go to the NICU. Stand in front of incubator number 4. Look at that baby. Look at his nose. It is your nose. Look at the shape of his ears. They are the sterling ears. The ones you used to complain about because they stuck out too much. Liam flinched. If you can look at that boy, a boy fighting for every single breath with your blood running through his veins, and tell me he is a stranger, then you are right, I said, my voice hardening into steel. You are not his father, because a father knows his own child. If you choose to trust a piece of paper printed by a woman who has controlled you your entire life over the flesh and blood screaming for you downstairs, then you do not deserve him. You do not deserve to be called Dad. Liam stared at me. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. The doubt was there, flickering behind the rage. Then, movement in the corner caught his eye. Grandma Rose stood up. She had been so quiet, he had forgotten she was there. She walked toward him. She moved with a speed and grace that defied her 80 years. She stopped directly in front of him. Liam towered over her. But at that moment, she seemed 10 feet tall. Mrs. Weatherford, please, this is a private matter, Liam stammered, trying to regain his composure. Slap. The sound was like a gunshot in the small room. Rose's hand connected with Liam's cheek with a force that snapped his head to the side. It was not a slap of anger. It was a slap of correction. It was the kind of slap you give a hysterical person to bring them back to reality. Liam stumbled back, clutching his cheek. He looked at her in absolute shock. You hit me. Someone had to, Rose said. Her voice was low and dangerous. You are hysterical. Liam, you are not thinking. You are reacting. You are dancing to a tune that was composed before you were even born. She reached into her bag again. She pulled out the file she had shown me earlier. She threw it at him. It hit his chest and scattered onto the floor. Pick it up, she commanded. Liam looked at her, terrified. He knelt down and picked up the papers. That is the original report, Rose said. Obtained directly from the Genetics Prime server logs by my legal team an hour ago. You see, Liam, your mother is a very powerful woman, but she is careless. She thinks everyone has a price. She forgets that some people have principles. Liam looked at the paper in his hand. He looked at the paper he had thrown at me. He held them side by side. They have the same reference number, he whispered. The same date. Read the result, Rose ordered. 99.99%, Liam read. His voice shook. But this one says, look at the pixelation on the logo of the one your mother gave you, Rose pointed out. Using her cane to point at the crumpled paper, look at the alignment of the text. It is a Photoshop job. Liam, a bad one. She pasted the rejection text over the real results. Liam looked closer. He saw it. Now that it was pointed out, the artifacts of the forgery were obvious. The font on the 0% line was slightly darker, slightly sharper than the rest of the document. She lied, Liam whispered. The color drained from his face. She told me to my face. She has been lying to you since you were in short pants, Rose said. She lied about Emily stealing the necklace. She lied about the car maintenance. She lied about the insurance. No. Liam shook his head, retreating into denial. No, she wouldn't go this far. Not with a baby. She wanted a grandchild. She wouldn't reject her own blood. Rose reached into her pocket. She pulled out a small, sleek digital recorder. You think so? Rose asked. You think there is a line she won't cross? Then you need to hear this. She pressed the button. The volume was turned up to the maximum. Beatrice's voice filled the room, clear, arrogant, and unmistakably cruel. I am in the middle of a dinner with the senator. Why are you calling me with this drama? Liam froze. His eyes went wide. Then let nature take its course. I have always doubted the validity of that pregnancy. Don't bother me again. That child is not a pureblood of the House of Sterling, and I am not interrupting my evening for a bastard. The recording ended with the sharp click of the call disconnecting. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Liam stood there, frozen. The paper slipped from his fingers and fluttered to the floor, mixing together, the truth and the lie, swirling around his feet. He looked at me. His eyes were wide, filled with a horror so profound it looked like madness. She knew, he whispered. She knew he was mine. The test proves she knew. And she still... He choked. He couldn't finish the sentence. The reality of it was too monstrous. His mother hadn't just ignored a call. She had made a calculated decision to let his son die because he was inconvenient for her evening schedule. She had known the baby was a Sterling, and she had rejected him anyway. The illusion of the loving matriarch, the image of the protective mother he had clung to for 30 years, shattered into a million pieces. He saw the strings. He saw the manipulation. He saw the puppet master standing in the shadows, laughing at him. His knees gave out. He didn't fall gracefully. He collapsed. He hit the hospital floor hard, his expensive suit tearing at the knee. He didn't seem to notice. He crawled toward the bed. He reached for my hand, his fingers trembling so violently he could barely hold on to me. Emily, he sobbed. It was a guttural sound, ripped from the bottom of his chest. Oh God, Emily, what have I done? What have I done? He pressed his forehead against the metal rail of the bed. I believed her, he wept. I let her take the car. I let her send me away. I almost walked out on you. I almost walked out on Leo. I looked down at him. Part of me wanted to pull my hand away. Part of me wanted to tell him it was too late. But looking at the wreckage of the man beneath me, I realized that he was a victim too. He had been abused his entire life, groomed to be blind, trained to be weak, but Grandma Rose wasn't done. She stepped forward and looked down at him. She didn't offer comfort, not yet. Get up, Liam, she said sharply. He looked up at her, tears streaming down his face. You can cry later, Rose said. Right now, you have a choice. You can stay on the floor and be the little boy Mommy controls. Or you can stand up and be the father that boy in the incubator needs. She pointed to the door. Beatrice is waiting in the lobby. She thinks you are up here signing divorce papers. She thinks she has won. Liam wiped his face. His expression changed. The sorrow hardened into something else. Something cold. Something dangerous. She tried to kill my son, Liam said. The words came out slow, spacing them out as if he was tasting the poison in them. Yes, Rose said. Liam stood up. He was unsteady at first, but then he straightened his spine. He adjusted his torn jacket. He looked at the fake DNA test on the floor, then crushed it under the heel of his shoe. I am going to kill her, he whispered. No, Rose said calmly. That is too easy, and it is illegal. We do not want to go to prison. Liam, we want justice, and justice is not a bullet. Justice is stripping her of everything she loves. Rose walked over and handed him a handkerchief. Wipe your face. Beatrice is organizing a party next week. A welcome home party for the baby she thinks won't survive, or at least for the son she thinks she has reclaimed. We are going to attend. Liam looked at Rose. confusion warring with his rage. Attend? I want to strangle her. We will do something much worse, Rose promised. We are going to let her throw her party. We are going to let her invite all her rich friends, and then, in front of everyone she cares about, we are going to play that tape. Liam looked at the recorder in Rose's hand. He looked at me. I nodded. For Leo, I said. Liam took a deep breath. The ghost of the weak man flickered and died. For Leo, he repeated. And for you. He turned to the door. I have to go down there. I have to tell her I need time. I have to lie to her. Can you do it? Rose asked. Can you look her in the eye and not spit in her face? Liam looked at the door. I have been lying to myself about who she is for 30 years. Lying to her will be the easiest thing I have ever done. He opened the door and walked out. He didn't look back. He walked with a new weight, a new purpose. The puppet strings had been cut, and the marionette was finally learning to walk on his own. The week that followed was a blur of high-tech medicine and cold. Calculated strategy, thanks to the squadron of specialists Grandma Rose had flown in, and the fact that money was no longer an object. My recovery was nothing short of miraculous. My ribs were still taped, and my breathing was shallow. But I was standing. Leo, my little fighter, had been moved from the high-risk incubator to a step-down unit. He was gaining weight. He was going to live. But while my body was healing, my heart had hardened into something unrecognizable. I looked in the mirror and didn't see the scared girl who used to cry in the bathroom because her mother-in-law made fun of her shoes. I saw a woman who had survived a murder attempt. Then came the invitation. It arrived on heavy cream cardstock, embossed with gold leaf. The Sterling family cordially invites you to a celebration of life and legacy, welcoming the newest heir, Leo Sterling, and unveiling the future of the waterfront project. I threw it onto the hospital tray table. She is unbelievable, I said. Leo is 7 days old. He is still in the hospital, and she wants to throw a gala? Liam was pacing the room. He had barely slept in a week. The revelation of his mother's betrayal had stripped away his boyish softness, leaving him looking sharp and exhausted. It is not about Leo, Liam said, his voice laced with disgust. It is a PR stunt. The rumors about the accident are leaking. People are whispering that she abandoned you. Investors are getting nervous about the waterfront project because of the bad press. She needs a photo op. She needs to show the world a happy, united family to stabilize the stock price. He picked up the invitation and made to rip it in half. We are not going. I am not parading my son around like a trophy for that woman. No, I said, stopping his hand. We are going. Liam looked at me, shocked. Emily, are you insane? After what she did? I can't look at her without wanting to scream. That is exactly why we are going, I said. I looked over at Grandma Rose, who was sitting in her usual spot, reviewing a stack of financial reports. If we don't go, she controls the narrative. She will tell everyone we are unstable, ungrateful, or too sick to attend. She will spin it. But if we go... Rose looked up over her reading glasses. Her lips curved into a small, terrifying smile. If you go, you step onto the stage she has built, and once you are on stage, you can take the microphone. The morning of the party, Rose arrived at the temporary apartment she had rented for us, a penthouse that looked down on the Sterling estate from a mocking height. She was carrying a wangy, black garment bag. Beatrice expects you to wear pastels, Rose said, unzipping the bag. She expects the repentant daughter-in-law, the quiet mouse who is grateful to be allowed back into the fold. She expects you to look weak. She pulled the dress out. It was not pastel. It was red, a deep, violent crimson, like fresh blood on snow. It was silk, structured and architectural, with a neckline that was sharp and dangerous. It was a dress for a queen, not a princess. This is a Valentino custom, Rose said. It cost $20,000, and I want you to wear it like armor. It is beautiful, I whispered, running my hand over the silk. But Beatrice will hate it. She says red is vulgar. Beatrice is about to learn that vulgarity is the least of her problems, Rose said. She turned to Liam. And you need to play the part of the doting son one last time. When you walk in, you kiss her cheek, you smile, you let her think she has won. Can you do that? Liam buttoned his cuffs. His hands were steady. I have watched her lie to my face for 30 years. I can give her 1 hour of performance art. Good, Rose said. She checked her watch, a platinum timepiece that looked far too expensive for a retired gardener. Because at 9 a.m, the market opened, and at 9:15, a series of holding companies owned by Legacy Holdings executed a bulk purchase order. I froze. What did you do? Grandma? The Sterling Group is a publicly traded company, Rose said, her voice smooth as glass. But the family retained 49% of the voting stock to maintain control. Beatrice was so busy embezzling funds to pay for her boyfriend's Porsche that she didn't notice the liquidity crisis she created. She had to sell off small blocks of shares to cover her tracks. Rose walked over to the window. I bought them all, as of this morning. Legacy Holdings owns 51% of the Sterling Group. I didn't just buy her debt. Emily, I bought her throne. My breath caught in my throat. She works for you? Does she know? Not yet, Rose said. She knows a mysterious investor has bailed out the company and stabilized the stock. She invited this investor to the party tonight. She thinks she is going to meet a savior who will write her a blank check. Rose turned back to us, her eyes gleaming. She has reserved the VIP table, front and center, for the chairman of Legacy Holdings. She is expecting an old man in a suit. I think she will be quite surprised to see the peasant woman sitting there. The Sterling estate was glowing. Searchlights swept the sky, and a line of limousines snaked down the long driveway. Beatrice had spared no expense. She needed to dazzle the city of Chicago into forgetting the rumors. She needed to prove that the House of Sterling was unbreakable. As our car pulled up, I saw the paparazzi lining the red carpet. Beatrice had hired them. She wanted the world to see the reconciliation. Liam squeezed my hand. Ready? Ready, I said. The valet opened the door. I stepped out. The silence was instantaneous. Then, the flashbulbs exploded. The red dress was a shockwave. Against the sea of black tuxedos and polite beige gowns, I looked like a flame. I stood tall. My chin lifted. Ignoring the pain in my ribs, I didn't look like a victim of a car crash. I looked like I owned the pavement I was walking on. We walked into the ballroom. It was transformed into a winter wonderland, with white roses and crystal icicles hanging from the ceiling. A 20-piece orchestra was playing a waltz. Beatrice was at the center of the room, holding court. She was wearing gold, dripping in diamonds, looking every inch the benevolent matriarch. Standing next to her, looking uncomfortable in a tuxedo that was a size too tight, was Julian, the tennis coach. She had actually invited him. She introduced him to the senator as a consultant for the new wellness center. The arrogance was breathtaking. She believed she was untouchable. When she saw us, her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. She took in the red dress. She took in the defiance in my eyes, but she recovered instantly. "Liam! Emily!" she cried out, opening her arms. The crowd parted for us. "Oh, look at you. You look healthy." "Thank you, Beatrice," I said, my voice cool and projected. Recovery is easier when you have the truth on your side. Beatrice's eyes narrowed, but she kept the smile plastered on her face. "Well, come in. Come in. Everyone is dying to see you. We are just waiting for our special guest of honor. The chairman of Legacy Holdings is joining us tonight, a very important partner." "Is that so?" Liam asked, keeping his hands in his pockets. "Yes," Beatrice gushed, lowering her voice. "He just acquired a majority stake. It is a huge win for us. Liam, it secures your future." "I am sure it does," Liam said dryly. Just then, a hush fell over the room. The maitre d' was leading someone to the raised VIP table, the table directly facing the stage. the seat of honor. It was Grandma Rose. She was not wearing her gardening clothes. She was wearing a midnight blue velvet gown with a collar of pearls that would have made the Queen of England jealous. She walked with her cane, but she didn't limp. She marched. Beatrice frowned. What is she doing here? And who let her in that dress? She marched over to the maitre d'. Excuse me, Beatrice hissed, loud enough for us to hear. Why is the grandmother seating herself at the chairman's table? Get her out of there. That seat is for the owner of Legacy Holdings. The maitre d' looked at his clipboard, then at Beatrice. He looked terrified. Mrs. Sterling, he whispered. That is the owner of Legacy Holdings. The reservation is under the name Rose Weatherford, chairwoman. Beatrice froze. The color drained from her face so fast she looked like a corpse. She stared at Rose. Rose sat down, adjusted her napkin, and poured herself a glass of vintage wine. She lifted the glass toward Beatrice and winked. It was the wink of a sniper who had just lined up the shot. No, Beatrice whispered. That is impossible. She sells vegetables. She sells leverage, Mother, Liam said softly, stepping up beside her. And I think she just bought you. Beatrice spun around to face him, panic flaring in her eyes. Liam, did you know? Is this some kind of sick joke? Before she could scream, the orchestra stopped. The master of ceremonies tapped the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your hostess, Mrs. Beatrice Sterling. Beatrice looked at the stage. She looked at Rose. She looked at the hundreds of guests watching her. She had no choice. She had to play the part. She swallowed her terror, fixed her smile, and walked up the stairs to the stage. She took the microphone. Her hand was shaking, the diamonds on her wrist trembling in the spotlight. Welcome, she said, her voice slightly higher than usual. Welcome, friends, family, and new partners. She glanced nervously at Rose. Tonight is a celebration of family. We have been through a dark time, a terrible accident, but the Sterling spirit is resilience. She gestured toward me. My daughter-in-law, Emily, is here with us. You know, when Liam first brought her home, I called her my little Cinderella. A polite ripple of laughter went through the crowd. Because she came from such humble beginnings, Beatrice continued, gaining confidence, trying to humiliate me back into submission. She didn't know our world. She didn't know our rules, but she was lucky. She was a lucky Cinderella who found her prince, and even though she has had her struggles with driving and responsibility, we forgive her. Because that is what family does. The room was silent. The insult was clear. She was publicly calling me a clumsy, a lucky peasant who should be grateful for her mercy. She smiled at me. Emily, dear, why don't you come up here? I am sure you want to thank everyone for their prayers during your recovery. She thought I would refuse. She thought I would run. She thought I would come up and mumble a thank you and retreat to the shadows. I looked at Grandma Rose. Rose nodded. One sharp, decisive nod. I walked to the stairs. The red silk swished around my legs like liquid fire. I climbed the steps. I didn't look at the floor. I looked directly at Beatrice. I reached for the microphone. Beatrice held on to it for a second, her eyes warning me, "Don't you dare." Her eyes said. I pulled it from her hand. I turned to the crowd. The lights were blinding, but I didn't blink. I saw the mayor. I saw the bankers. I saw the society wives who had snubbed me for 5 years. And right in the front row, I saw Julian, the lover, sipping champagne paid for with my son's inheritance. Thank you, Beatrice, I said. My voice was steady, amplified by the speakers, filling every corner of the ballroom. It is true, I was a Cinderella. I scrubbed the floors of your expectations. I sat in the ashes of your insults. I believed that if I was good enough, kind enough, the wicked stepmother would eventually love me. A gasp rippled through the room. Beatrice stiffened. But this is the real world, I continued. And in the real world, the stepmother doesn't just lock you in the attic. In the real world, she cuts the brake lines of your car. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb about to detonate. Beatrice calls me lucky, I said, walking to the edge of the stage. Was I lucky when I was bleeding in a crushed car? Was I lucky when my son was cut out of me while I was in a coma? Or was I lucky when my mother-in-law received the emergency call from the hospital, a call to save her grandson's life, and hung up because she was at a party? "Stop her!" Beatrice shrieked, lunging for me. "She is drunk! Cut the mic!" Liam stepped out from the wings. He blocked his mother. He held her back effortlessly. "Let her speak," Liam said. "Liam!" Beatrice screamed. "She is ruining us." "No, Mother," Liam said. "She is freeing us." I looked back at the crowd. I raised my hand, pointing to the projection screen behind me, a massive screen that was supposed to show architectural renderings of the new resort. "You wanted to show the future of the Sterling family?" I asked. "Let's show them the past first." I looked at Grandma Rose. She picked up her remote control from the table. She pressed the button. The architectural renderings disappeared. The screen flickered black. And then, a timestamp appeared. February 1st, 8:42 in the evening. The audio began to play. It wasn't just the recording. It was a synchronized video Rose's team had put together. On the left side of the screen was the dashcam footage from my car, the rain, the spinning lights, the terrifying sound of the crash. On the right side was security footage from the Palmer House Hotel, the footage Rose had bought from the hotel security chief. It showed Beatrice standing in the alcove, holding her phone. The contrast was visceral. On one side, blood, screams, darkness. On the other side, champagne, silk, Beatrice's bored face. Then, her voice boomed through the ballroom speakers, synced perfectly with the video of her lips moving on screen. "Don't bother me again. That child is not a pureblood of the House of Sterling, and I am not interrupting my evening for a bastard." The gasp from the crowd sucked the air out of the room. A glass shattered somewhere in the back. Beatrice stopped struggling against Liam. She stood frozen, watching herself on the giant screen, watching her social currency evaporate in real time. I looked at Julian. He was trying to sneak away toward the exit. "And you, Julian," I said into the mic. "Don't leave yet. We haven't gotten to the part about the Cayman Island accounts." I turned back to Beatrice. She looked small now. The gold and diamonds looked like costumes on a decaying corpse. "The clock has struck 12, Beatrice," I said, "and your carriage has turned back into a pumpkin." I dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. Grandma Rose stood up at her VIP table. She raised her glass to the stunned room. "Dinner is served," she said. The echo of Beatrice's recorded voice hung in the ballroom like toxic smoke. Bastard. The word bounced off the crystal chandeliers and settled into the horrified silence of Chicago's elite. The screen behind me remained frozen on the split image, the wreckage of my car on one side, and Beatrice holding a champagne flute on the other. I looked out at the sea of faces. The senator had dropped his fork. The mayor was whispering frantically to his aide. The society wives who had spent 5 years looking through me were now looking at me with mouths agape, their pearls forgotten. Beatrice stood at the bottom of the stage steps. Her face was a mask of contorted rage, the makeup cracking under the strain of absolute panic. She looked at the screen, then at me, and her survival instinct kicked in. It was ugly. It was violent. "Turn it off!" she screamed, her voice shredding the silence. She lunged toward the AV booth on the side of the stage. "Cut the power! They are lying! It is a deepfake!" She scrambled up the stairs, her gold dress tangling around her legs, her eyes fixed on the microphone I had dropped. She wanted to silence me. She wanted to regain control of the room. She reached out, her nails curved like talons. "You ungrateful little witch," she hissed, lunging for my throat. "I will kill you for this!" But she never reached me. 2 men in dark suits stepped out from the shadows of the wings. They were not the hotel security. They were Rose's private protection detail. They moved with the efficiency of machines, stepping between me and Beatrice. One of them caught Beatrice's wrist in midair. He didn't twist it, but he held it with an immovability that stopped her cold. Please step back. Mrs. Sterling, the guard said, his voice low and bored. Get your hands off me. Beatrice shrieked, struggling uselessly against his grip. Do you know who I am? I am Beatrice Sterling. I own this city. Liam, make them stop. Arrest her. She hacked the system. She turned desperately to her son, searching for the ally she had manipulated for decades. Liam was standing next to the podium. He had a laptop open on a small side table, the source of the hack. He looked at his mother, and for the first time in his life, there was no fear in his eyes. There was only disgusted pity. I didn't hack anything, Mother, Liam said into his own lapel microphone. His voice was calm, which made it terrifying. I just played the truth, and we are not done yet. Liam tapped a key on the laptop. The screen behind me changed. The video of the crash vanished, replaced by 2 documents side by side. They were blown up to 10 feet tall so even the people in the back row could read the fine print. On the left was the forgery Beatrice had given Liam, the one claiming 0% paternity. On the right was the original lab report from Genetics Prime. Father, Liam Sterling. Probability, 99.99%. I stepped forward, picking up the microphone the guard had retrieved for me. You called my son a bastard, I said, my voice echoing through the hall. You told your son that his wife was a whore. You tried to destroy a marriage and a child's life to protect your precious bloodline. I pointed at the screen. But the bloodline was never in danger. Beatrice, the only thing in danger was your ego. You knew Leo was a Sterling. The date on the report proves you knew weeks ago. You lied to Liam. You lied to the press. And you lied to yourself. The crowd murmured. I could hear the shifting tide of opinion. The shock was turning into judgment. Phones were out everywhere, recording the downfall of the Queen. Beatrice was panting, her chest heaving. She pulled her arm free from the guard and smoothed her dress, trying to summon one last shred of dignity. These are fabrications, she announced, turning to the crowd with a trembling smile. My son is distraught. His wife is mentally unstable. This is a family dispute that should be handled in private, not— Oh, shut up. Beatrice. The voice came from the VIP table. It wasn't loud, but it carried an authority that made the air vibrate. Grandma Rose stood up. She picked up her cane and began to walk toward the stage. The crowd parted for her instinctively. They didn't know who she was, but they knew power when they saw it. She walked up the stairs, the velvet of her midnight blue gown trailing behind her like regal robes. Beatrice stared at her. You, she spat. The gardener, get off my stage. Security, remove this peasant woman. Rose didn't stop. She walked right up to Beatrice until they were inches apart. Beatrice was taller in her heels, but Rose loomed over her. Peasant woman, Rose repeated, tasting the words. You have called me that for 5 years. You mocked my clothes. You mocked my home. You told Emily she was trash because she came from my womb. Rose turned to the audience. She scanned the room until her eyes locked on a gray-haired man in the second row, the president of the city bank. Hello, Mr. Henderson, Rose said pleasantly. Mr. Henderson turned pale. He stood up immediately, buttoning his jacket. Mrs. Weatherford, he stammered, bowing his head. I didn't know you would be attending. Beatrice froze. She looked from the banker to Rose. Mrs. Weatherford? Rose turned back to Beatrice. Allow me to reintroduce myself. My name is Rose Weatherford, but on Wall Street, and in the ledgers of the companies that own your debt. I am listed as the chairwoman and majority shareholder of Legacy Holdings. Beatrice's mouth opened, but no sound came out. It was a silent scream of realization. Legacy Holdings. The shark. The entity that held the mortgage on the Sterling hotels. The entity she had been terrified of for years. You? Beatrice whispered. You are Legacy? I am, Rose said. And as of 9:15 this morning, I am also the owner of 51% of the Sterling Group. Rose reached into her small clutch and pulled out a document. It wasn't a prop. It was a notarized hostile takeover filing. You have been selling stock to cover your embezzlement. Beatrice, Rose said, her voice hard as diamond. You thought you were selling to anonymous brokers. You were selling to me. Every time you stole from your son to buy your boy a watch, I bought another brick of your empire. Rose slapped the document into Beatrice's chest. Beatrice clutched it reflexively. You are fired, Rose stated. The words rang out like a bell. You are removed as CEO, effective immediately, Rose continued. You are removed from the board. Your access to the company accounts has been revoked. Your keycards have been deactivated. And this building? I own the mortgage. You are trespassing. Beatrice shook her head violently. No, this is my company. My father built this. You can't take it. I am the Sterlings. You are a thief, Rose corrected. And thieves do not get to keep the crown. Beatrice looked around wildly. She looked at the senator, begging for help. The senator looked at his shoes. She looked at her friends. They turned their backs. Julian, she screamed, looking for her lover. Julian, call the lawyers. I followed her gaze. Julian, the young tennis coach with the tan and the expensive suit, was near the exit, but he wasn't calling lawyers. He was trying to slip out the side door, his eyes fixed on the exit sign like a lifeline. Going somewhere. Julian? Liam's voice cut through the air. Liam jumped off the stage. He moved faster than I had ever seen him move. He sprinted across the ballroom floor and intercepted Julian just as he reached the door. Julian tried to shove past him, but Liam grabbed him by the lapels of his tuxedo and slammed him against the wall. A vase of white roses crashed to the floor. Get off me, man, Julian shouted. I don't know anything. I am just a consultant. You are a consultant who drives a Porsche bought with my son's trust fund, Liam snarled. He reached into Julian's jacket pocket and pulled out a passport. Leaving the country? I don't think so. Liam shoved Julian toward a group of security guards. Hold him. The police will want to ask him about the offshore accounts in the Caymans. At the mention of police, the double doors at the back of the ballroom burst open. It wasn't hotel security this time. It was the Chicago Police Department, accompanied by agents in windbreakers that read, Economic Crimes Unit. The flashbulbs went into a frenzy. A detective walked straight down the center aisle, ignoring the stunned guests. He walked up the stairs to the stage. Beatrice Sterling? He asked. Beatrice backed away, stumbling over her dress. She hit the podium. There was nowhere left to run. No, she whimpered. Do not touch me. This is a mistake. I am a philanthropist. Mrs. Sterling, I have a warrant for your arrest, the detective said, his voice carrying to the back of the room. Charges include grand larceny, corporate embezzlement, wire fraud, and reckless endangerment of a minor. He pulled out a pair of handcuffs. The metal glinted under the chandeliers. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. I will not, Beatrice screamed. She looked possessed. You cannot arrest me in my own ballroom. I am Beatrice Sterling. The detective didn't argue. He grabbed her arm, spun her around, and snapped the cuffs onto her wrists. The click-click of the locking mechanism was the loudest sound in the world. Beatrice began to thrash. She kicked out, her heel catching the detective in the shin. Let me go! Liam! Help me! They are hurting me! Liam stood at the bottom of the stairs, watching. He stood next to me. He put his arm around my waist, supporting me as the adrenaline began to fade and the pain in my ribs returned. Liam! Beatrice wailed. I am your mother! Do something! Liam looked up at her. His face was stone. You stopped being my mother the moment you hung up that phone, Liam said. You are just a defendant now. The police began to drag her down the stairs. It was not a dignified exit. Beatrice was screaming obscenities, cursing Rose, cursing me, cursing the unborn child. Her hair had come loose, flying wild around her face. The mask of the elegant socialite was gone, revealing the ugly, twisted creature underneath. As they dragged her past the press line, the photographers showed no mercy. They crowded in, cameras flashing in her face, capturing every second of her humiliation. Mrs. Sterling, is it true you stole $3 million? Mrs. Sterling, did you fake the DNA test? Mrs. Sterling, look this way. She was swallowed by the chaos of the media, her screams fading as they pushed her through the double doors and out into the waiting squad car. Julian was led out behind her, his head hanging low, hiding his face from the cameras. The ballroom was left in a stunned, vibrating silence. The orchestra had fled. The waiters were frozen. The guests were staring at the empty stage where the dynasty had just crumbled. I looked at Grandma Rose. She was still standing at the podium. She looked out at the room, at the people who had enabled Beatrice, the people who had looked down on us, the people who worshipped money above all else. She leaned into the microphone one last time. "The party is over," she said. "Please leave. My cleaning crews need to scrub this place. It smells like rot." She turned and walked down the stairs. She didn't look back at the stunned elite of Chicago. She walked straight to me and Liam. "Well," Rose said, adjusting her pearl necklace, "that went according to plan." I looked at her, then at Liam, and finally at the empty doorway where Beatrice had vanished. My legs felt weak, but for the first time in 5 years, my chest felt light. The weight was gone. The shadow was gone. Liam pulled me close, kissing the top of my head. "It is over, Em. She is gone." "Yes," I whispered, leaning into him. "She is gone." The reign of Queen Beatrice had ended not with a whimper, but with the flash of cameras and the click of handcuffs, and standing in the ruins of her false empire, holding the hand of the man who had finally found his spine. I knew that the real story, our story, was just beginning. The silence that descended upon the ballroom after the police escorted Beatrice Sterling away was not empty. It was heavy, like the air after a thunderstorm when the ozone lingers and the pressure finally drops. The orchestra had packed up and fled. The guests had vanished into the night, desperate to distance themselves from the scandal, leaving behind half-eaten canapés and shattered wine glasses. For the first time in 5 years, the Sterling estate did not feel like a prison. It felt like a ruin, and standing amidst the wreckage were the only 3 people who mattered. Liam stood by the window, watching the red taillights of the police cruiser fade into the darkness. He turned to look at me. He looked older than he had that morning. The boyish charm that his mother had cultivated was gone, replaced by the weary gravity of a man who has just burned down his own house to save his soul. He walked over to where I was sitting on the edge of the stage. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He knew he hadn't earned it yet. Instead, he knelt down and rested his forehead against my knee. "I am free," he whispered. The words sounded foreign in his mouth. "I am actually free." I placed my hand on his head. "We are all free, Liam." Grandma Rose was sitting at the VIP table, finishing her glass of wine. She watched us with a calm, satisfied expression. I walked over to her, Liam trailing behind me like a ghost finding his footing. "Grandma," I said, "you owned the company for months. You knew about the embezzlement for weeks. Why did you wait until tonight? Why did you let me go through the accident? Why did you let me suffer for 5 years?" It was the question that had been gnawing at me. She had the power to stop Beatrice the day I married Liam. She could have saved me from the humiliation, the poverty, the loneliness. Rose set her glass down. She looked at me, and her eyes were not the eyes of a shark anymore. They were the eyes of the grandmother who used to braid my hair. "Because you were not ready, Emily," she said softly. "If I had stepped in 5 years ago, you would have been grateful. Yes, but you would have remained a victim. You would have been the poor girl saved by her rich grandmother. You would never have known your own strength." She reached out and took my hand. "I watched you. I watched you endure. I watched you navigate their shark tank without losing your kindness. I wanted you to stand up on your own 2 feet so that when you finally walked away, you would know that you did it. Not me. You." Her expression darkened, the steel returning for a brief moment. "But when she touched the brake lines," Rose said, her voice dropping to a growl, when she threatened the life of my great-grandson. The lesson was over. I can watch you be humiliated, Emily. I cannot watch you be killed. That is why I destroyed her tonight. Not for business, not for money. But because she forgot that mother bears are not the only ones who protect their cubs. Grandmothers have sharper teeth. The days that followed were a flurry of legal paperwork and seismic shifts. The scandal of Beatrice Sterling's arrest dominated the news cycle for weeks. The headlines were brutal. Socialite matriarch arrested for fraud. Grandmother abandons dying infant. The fall of the House of Sterling. Liam did not hide. He did not run back to Japan. He stood in the center of the storm and faced it. We met with the lawyers in the glossy conference room of Legacy Holdings. Mr. Vance, the attorney, slid a stack of documents across the table toward Liam. "This is the restructuring plan for the Sterling Trust," Vance said. "As the sole heir, you are entitled to the remaining liquid assets, the estate, and the minority shares not owned by Legacy Holdings. It is roughly $40 million. Liam looked at the papers. He didn't pick up the pen. "Where did the money come from?" Liam asked. "Well," Vance hesitated, "it is a mix of historical investments, real estate, and obviously, the funds Beatrice diverted were returned to the pot." "It is dirty," Liam said. He pushed the papers back. "It is money made from squeezing workers, cutting corners, and stealing from shareholders. It is the money she used to try and buy my wife's abortion. I don't want it." "Liam," I said, surprised. "That is your birthright." "No," Liam said, turning to me. "My birthright is my name, and she ruined that too. I am not building our future on a foundation of rot. Emily, I want to start over. Real work, real designs, just us." He looked at Rose. "Mrs. Weatherford, can you dissolve the trust? Can you liquidate it?" "I can," Rose said, a glimmer of respect in her eyes. "Then do it," Liam said. "Sell the estate, sell the furniture, sell the jewelry. I don't want a penny of it." And he meant it. We walked out of that office with nothing but our skills and each other, and it was the richest I had ever felt. The first thing we did was change the one thing Beatrice valued most: the name. We stood in the courthouse, holding Leo, who was finally out of the hospital, a small bundle of warmth and resilience, and filed the petition. We did not want him to carry the burden of the Sterling legacy. We did not want him to be associated with a woman who had wished him dead. When the clerk handed us the stamped certificate, I looked at the name typed in bold letters: Leo Rose Weatherford. Liam smiled. It was the first time I had seen him smile with genuine, unburdened joy in years. "It suits him," he said. "He looks like a Weatherford." "He has your nose," I reminded him. "But he has your heart," Liam said. "And thank God for that." We started our own firm, Weatherford Associates. We didn't have a skyscraper downtown. We rented a small, exposed brick studio in the Arts District. We didn't have million-dollar contracts handed to us by nepotism. We pitched for kitchen renovations and small commercial retrofits. We worked late nights, eating takeout on the floor, surrounded by blueprints. Liam was brilliant. Without his mother breathing down his neck, his creativity exploded. He designed with passion, with empathy, and I was the structural backbone, ensuring every beam was strong, every foundation secure. We were partners, in every sense of the word. Meanwhile, justice was being served in a cold concrete cell 40 miles away. Beatrice's trial was swift. The evidence Rose had collected was irrefutable: the dashcam footage, the phone records, the financial trails leading to the Caymans. It was a slam dunk for the prosecution. She was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, but prison is a society of its own, with its own hierarchy and its own moral code. We heard reports through Rose's connections. Beatrice was not running the cell block. She was not a queen bee. She was a pariah, even in prison. There are lines you do not cross. Theft is one thing, murder is another, but abandoning a premature baby, rejecting your own grandchild to die because you were busy at a party? The other inmates despised her. She ate alone. She walked alone during yard time. The women who had committed crimes of survival looked down on the rich woman who had committed a crime of ego. She was living in a hell of absolute isolation, stripped of her mirrors, her creams, and her audience. She was finally, truly, nobody. 1 year later, the sun was filtering through the leaves of the giant oak tree in Grandma Rose's garden. The air smelled of soil and blooming hydrangeas. It was a perfect Saturday afternoon. I sat on the wooden porch swing, watching. Leo, now a chubby, energetic 1-year-old, was wobbling across the grass. He was chasing a butterfly, his laughter bubbling up like a fountain. He fell onto his diapered bottom, looked around, and immediately scrambled back up. "He is fast," Liam said, walking out of the kitchen with 2 glasses of lemonade. He sat down next to me, resting his arm along the back of the swing. "He is a Weatherford," I said, taking the glass. "We don't stay down." Grandma Rose was in the garden, wearing her straw hat and her gardening gloves. She was teaching Leo how to touch the petals without crushing them. She looked content. She looked like she had finally put down her sword. "Did you see the news?" Liam asked quietly. "About the donation?" I asked. Liam nodded. Rose had kept her word. She had liquidated the sterling assets, but she didn't keep the money for legacy holdings. That morning, the announcement had been made. The entire fortune, nearly $60 million after the sale of the estate, had been donated to establish the Tiny Hearts Foundation. It was a charity dedicated to providing top-tier medical care for premature infants and financial support for single mothers escaping abusive households. Beatrice's greed was now funding the very people she had tried to crush. It was the ultimate poetic justice. Every dollar she had stolen was now saving a life. "She is amazing," Liam said, watching Rose lift Leo into the air. "She is," I agreed. "She taught us that power isn't about controlling people. It is about empowering them." Liam turned to me. He took my hand, his thumb tracing the scars on my knuckles from the accident. Scars that had faded and would never fully disappear. "Emily," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I know I can never undo the past. I know I can never give you back those 5 years. But I promise you, for the rest of my life, I will spend every day earning the right to be your husband." I looked at him. I saw the regret that still lived in the corners of his eyes, but I also saw the love. It wasn't the weak, fearful love of the past. It was a love that had been broken and put back together, stronger at the broken places. "You don't have to earn it, Liam," I said, leaning my head on his shoulder. "You just have to keep choosing us, every single day." "I will," he promised. "Always." Later that evening, as the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of purple and gold, I had to run an errand. I took the new car, a safe, sturdy Volvo that Liam checked every single morning before I got in. My route took me past the state correctional facility. It was a gray, imposing building surrounded by barbed wire. I usually took the long way around to avoid it, but today, I didn't. I slowed down as I drove past the high concrete walls. I looked at the guard towers. I thought about the woman inside. I thought about the woman who had sat on a throne and ordered my destruction. I wondered if she was looking out a window. I wondered if she regretted what she did, or if she only regretted getting caught. I felt a ghost of the old anger, the old fear, but then I looked in the rearview mirror. I saw the empty car seat in the back, waiting for Leo. I saw my own eyes, clear and calm. I didn't stop. I didn't roll down the window to scream. I didn't spit. I just smiled. It wasn't a smile of gloating. It was a smile of indifference. Beatrice Sterling was no longer the villain of my story. She was just a footnote. She was a lesson I had learned and moved past. I pressed the accelerator. The car surged forward, smooth and responsive. I drove away from the prison, away from the past, and toward the house where my husband was cooking dinner and my grandmother was reading stories to my son. They say blood is thicker than water, but I have learned that is a lie told by people who want to control you. Blood is just biology. Family is not DNA. Family is not a name on a birth certificate or a face in a portrait gallery. Family are the people who stand by your hospital bed when the insurance runs out. Family are the people who cut the puppet strings even when it hurts. Family are the people who are willing to burn down the world to keep you warm when you are shivering in the cold. I am Emily Weatherford, and I am finally home. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below to share your thoughts and connect with others. And here's a question for you. If you were me, would you forgive a husband who once trusted his mother more than he trusted you? I am reading every single comment. Don't forget to subscribe to the Sweet Rose Drama channel, like the video, and hit the hype button to help this story reach even more people. Thank you.